Meeting of the West Newbury Selectboard, November 21st. It is 7:11. Let's call this up to order. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation via Zoom. Some announcements. The Pentucket Arts Foundation Makers Market is Saturday, December 3rd from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. at VZ Park in Groveland. Let me get the do we have the announcement? So I did see it and just wanted to. So all sorts of handmade, local art, jewelry, holiday decorations. So this is a great thing with the proceeds to the Pentucket Arts Foundation. As usual, looking for volunteers for boards and positions. Look at wnewbury.org/volunteer, and also if you want to stay up to date on news and announcements from the town, wnewbury.org/subscribe. Any other announcements, guys? Okay. Our first order of business is our request for appointment. Allison Hardy to serve on the Historic District Commission. Hi, Allison.
Hello.
How are you? Thank you for coming in. Do you want to just come up? Just come up here for a second. Probably can hear you, but it's better. Well, I'm finding it. Any questions?
Yeah, so says you did serve on this kind of got truncated the page, but it looks like you served on the Topsfield Historic Commission.
Correct.
Great. Did you recently move here from Topsfield or?
I did.
Yeah, great. Nice.
What do you think of West Newbury? That's like putting you on the spot, right?
Very rural.
Yeah.
And everyone has a dog, which is us.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have great experience for historic
I look at a
preservation.
lot of historic houses, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Her initial letter of interest was for the Historical Commission,
correct.
but obviously there's no reduce there, so Jeff had suggested the Historic District
Great.
Which I like, 'cause it has fewer meetings.
And you appeared on This Old House?
I'm also gonna be here on February 2nd of this next year.
Really?
Yeah,
That's impressive.
they call me when they have window problems.
Nice. So that's your own company?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And are you personally doing the work?
I try to stay in the office, but today I was out hanging windows.
Yeah, wow, okay. Kudos to you.
It's a labor of love, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Thanks.
Go
I
for it.
don't have any other,
Yeah.
I would nominate Allison Hardy. Or make a motion to nominate Allison Hardy to the Historic District Commission.
Term ending
June 30th, 2023.
23. Okay.
Okay.
Second.
For discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
great. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for the interest.
Allison, I'll follow up with you regarding Frank.
Schedule.
So I noticed both of these applications, the writing gets cut off. Is it a fillable form? Both Kelly's
It's
and,
a PDF.
PDF.
It allows us to continue typing. But
Yeah.
I was concerned about that. If I was gonna print it, it definitely was gonna truncate it, but I was hoping you'd be looking at the live PDF.
no, ours is the truncated version, yeah. So I don't know if we can modify the form or something. So you, oh, sorry. Kelly's next, right?
Yes. Kelly Scott to serve on the Cable Advisory Committee. That's great. We need we've been needing some volunteers for that, so that, for a long time, so that's good.
Yeah, that is good. So I'm just curious, what inspired you to choose that particular committee? You know, because you've been here a bunch of times and you've lived here pretty much your entire life, maybe your entire life, and so why? I'm just curious.
So I turned 10 in the house that I live in now. I'm 50, so I've been here about 40 years.
Yeah.
But I taught for over 20 in Ipswich. I wasn't really tied into the students in Nantucket, other than my own children and their friends going through. In Ipswich, we have a really strong cable access program. I can kids straight across the street and use the equipment and put stuff up on the access channel all the time.
Yeah.
Groveland has one, Merrimack has one. West Newbury, I mean, you said it's on the cable access channel tonight. I'll believe you, but I can't find that information anywhere. I can't find any information about who's using the cameras, the audiovisual equipment, the technology to educate us that the PEG money is for. And I would love to be able to just kind of, I think some years back, there was some real movement in a direction to try to get
Yeah.
this moving, and for whatever reason, it kind of stalled out.
Okay,
I think now the time, because I'm retired working at the library, right? I have that space across the street of the old town hall that we could offer classes. And I have the teen librarian position where I could actually specifically target teens, tying in with Pentucket, Groveland, Merrimack, to try to pull something together.
Wow.
I would love to see kids at your meetings. I would love to see kids at the town meetings. I'd love to see them at the parades.
yeah,
And the ball games and the, interviewing people at the historic commission.
Yeah.
Interviewing
Yeah.
our townsfolk about their houses,
nice,
right?
sold.
But I don't know how you might need some help, so this is,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, I move that we nominate, Kelly Scott to the, Cable Advisory Committee.
Thank you. I can't find any minutes, only agendas. And no new meeting date. So I'd love anything you guys could help me with that. Thank you.
Great, did we take a vote?
No,
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
sorry.
Thank you, Kelly.
So,
That would be through.
term ending, 6/30/2023 as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you both, that's great. Our next item is a request for appointment of the town accountant.
I move to nominate or to appoint Jennifer Walsh to town accountant and to enter into contract negotiations with her.
Second,
Discussion?
Yeah, so I participated in interviews with the town manager representing the select board, and I wrote a memo about the process that's in the packet. But just in summary, Jenny has over 20 years' experience in office work, in finance. She worked for the town of Tewksbury in the treasurer's office and the assessor's office. And coming here, she's worked in the finance department, done some really complex accounting and payroll projects for the town on behalf of the town manager, and also assumed some of the town accountant duties. And she's been interim town accountant for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, seems like forever, probably. Yeah, and she's taken it and run with it. So, and the thing that really came through in the interview, she's a town resident and she's very committed to the town. So the town interest is what is in the forefront of her mind, and I think she would be a great town accountant. She's good for the town.
yeah, I've, I guess, it's around 3 years now. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, but, I guess all I'll say is that, having, now been on the select board for 3.5 years, Jenny's been in the finance department, for the better part of the time I've been on the board, and I've had a chance to see the work that she does, how proactive Jenny is, how thorough she is, how accurate she is. And, I know you plan to work for the certification, and I think it's a great match for us, and I would emphasize or sort of repeat what Wendy says, the fact that you're a town resident. Is just a bonus, because, you're really focused on your community.
Further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Our next item is the tax classification hearing. We're going ahead with the things?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we've been working diligently for actually quite a while, and credit where credit is due. Former town accountant Stephanie Frontera left us in really good shape in terms of closing out the prior fiscal year, and that allowed us to focus. There's still quite a bit of work to do to be in a position to file the tax rate recap through the Mass DOR gateway. There's a lot of different component parts to that. But the fact that the prior year was largely closed out was certainly a big plus. And then the assessors did a lot of great work, and we'll turn it over to Christian in a minute. You can summarize the memo he's put in the packet in terms of the questions in front of you. But getting the values certified and getting the new growth certified were both done really timely, and there's a lot that contributed to that. But Christian, when you do have the floor, I'm sure the board would be interested to hear kind of the process you go through. But getting those so-called LA4 and LA13 for the new growth and the overall assessed values there's a lot that goes into doing that work, and then getting through Mass DOR and any back and forth or questions that they have. So we did see another significant increase in values this year, which if you're applying the budget and the amount that has to be raised for taxes across larger values, that does result in a lower projected tax rate. We've also built a model that we kind of actually build every spring, and we maintain through the budget season and into the fall to give us an estimate of what we think the actual tax impact will be, because obviously it's a rate times value. It's not a lower rate doesn't necessarily mean a lower tax bill. In fact, it rarely does, because costs do go up. But with the increased values, we're projecting almost a $2 reduction in the tax rate, and we're estimating tax impact of it varies depending on where on the continuum of home values, but for the 50th percentile, about 2%, 2.01%, which would be a estimated annual increase of about $165 over the course of the fiscal year. So there's all this kind of data that's been put in. Some of the other components that go into that, in addition to assessed values and new growth, are projected non-tax revenues. I work with Jenny on that. We both do that independently. She makes her projections, I make my projections, then we compare notes, and we actually we're almost like spot on right down the line. As you've heard me say before, in projecting non-tax revenues, we are directed by Mass Department of Revenue to be conservative. We're not pushing those numbers because the results of over projecting those would be not good. It would be a hit on free cash. So the direction we're giving from the state in terms of guidance is to be conservative. So we look at 5-year trends, and then we make qualitative adjustments based on either what we know to be going on. For instance, we work with the building department on what's in the pipeline for new homes, new permits issued, and so forth. Or sometimes we have qualitative information on, for instance, we budget revenues that we get from Kentucky for the offset resource officer. So there's a whole lot that goes into it, but we have completed basically all the documentation for the tax rate recap. We haven't posted it to Department of Revenue yet. We don't do that until after the tax classification hearing. So at this point, maybe Christian, you could outline for the board the specific votes that they'll be asked to take. This is summarized in his memo, and I didn't see it in tonight's packet, as well as just, pull back the curtain a little bit, Christian, on the process that you and the Board of Assessors go through.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is pretty much the final step in my yearly workflow, where most of the year I'm spending collecting sales data, updating partial components where if there's a permit being pulled or update on owner or anything like that. Anything that happens with any property in your town, I'm updating that parcel throughout the year and gathering data and what that means for the overall market. Sometime late in the summer, I start taking all this data and analyzing it and trying to figure out the bigger picture of what's going on as far as the overall town value and how the levy will be split amongst the taxpayers. So doing my analysis through about 20 different Excel spreadsheets right now. I come up with values for the current year, and based on this past year, it looks like there was a 21% increase in value. I will say that this is the most aggressive increase in value that the town has had, and it's also the most aggressive in Essex County for this fiscal year. That being true, I've also looked at sales after the sales study date, and they're still climbing. It isn't like I'm wrong in my estimates. It's just that I was trying to get as close to the number as I could, and it was still growing at the assessment date.
Christian, what is that cutoff date?
So I have to value
30th
as
or
of January 1st, 2022 was my assessment date.
Okay.
So all values that I publish are as of that date. Unless there was new construction on a parcel, then I can update that value up to June 30th. That's to capture new growth. And so once I gather all my information, analyze it, then I send it off to DOR with our representative there, and there's a lot of back and forth between different components and what they like to see smoothed out, and they go through their analysis and tell me what I need to work on, and I come back, and it's a few times back and forth, and eventually we settle on a final value for the town, and that number is then used for the LA4, which breaks down the town properties by category, as far as residential, commercial, and open space, industrial. And so from there, having the new growth, and that's just anything that was built on property or new lot splits over the past year. We're able to enter one side of the equation to get to the tax rate. The other side is the tax levy, which your board and Angus and FinCom all work on your timeline. So this is the meeting where we come together and decide on the last few items of tax policy, and from there we're able to send off the various schedules to DOR and come up with a final tax rate. Are able to send out tax bills in about a month and change.
So part of the process that we go through on the expense side is we key in every authorized appropriation voted by town meeting at both the annual and special town meetings in the spring as well as in the fall town meeting. And they all hit different accounts. Really, the only one that hits the raise and appropriate is the operating budget. Everything else tends to be paid from a CPA account, from stabilization, from free cash, from water retained earnings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those are reported, but end up being kind of a wash in terms of the tax rate because there's revenues that offset the expenses. But that exercise of kind of keying that all in and making sure it's all correct down to the penny. Normally the finance department does that. They do it based on the report the town clerk produces coming out of town meeting with certified expenditures. And this year Jim's office was helpful in going through and just proofing all those numbers to make sure everything's exactly right. And you know, you definitely want like 3 or 4 sets of eyes on this because it's you know, it's just so important to get it right. So it was a real team effort, you know, really for the last 2 months or so it takes to get to this point. So Christian's memo outlines the 4 questions that the board is asked to vote on, which would be the tax rate shift, the open space discount, the residential exemption, and the small commercial exemption. I know we can speak more to each of those if you want, but before we get to that, were there other questions that you had on? Actually, let me just, I don't think I've really said for those watching, I said about $2. So the current, or actually the prior FY22 tax rate was $13.01. Our estimate is that the current year tax rate will be $11.07. Just to be totally clear, I know you know this, but what you vote tonight, you don't set the tax rate. You know, we give you an estimate. Once we report all this to DOR, they come back with the tax rate. It's usually within, you know,
It's usually close.
yes, within 2 or 3 pennies of our estimate. I just want to make sure that just because I'm saying 11.07, that doesn't mean that's what it is. Maybe it ends up being 11.10 or 11.06 or something in that range. But the model we built is you know, has proven to be pretty good, very good. So Christian, do you want to summarize those, or does the board have questions? All good?
I can make motions because I
Yeah.
sort of done this.
Yeah, it's the same every year. And I'm sorry, I forgot to put page numbers on this packet. After I sent it out, I realized I forgot to put page numbers.
So I would make a motion to have a single tax rate versus residential versus commercial. There's so little commercial property in, if people read the paper recently, Newburyport actually did try to, I don't know if they passed it, but they did recommend having a split tax rate. In our case, there's so little commercial property in West Newbury that there's not really any reason to do that, and so the Board of Assessors voted 3-0 to recommend maintaining a single tax rate, and I would make a motion to maintain the single tax rate.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The same goes for the open space discount. As long as I've been on the board, we have not done that. The Board of Assessors voted 3-0 to recommend not to adopt an open space discount. The same with the residential exception.
Actually,
exemption.
Because
You want to do them separately?
I
Okay.
have a question about the open space also.
Okay, so I make a motion to recommend not to adopt an open space discount.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, so, you know, reading the description, I guess I don't understand why that even exists, because it says it's property classified as open space under MGL chapter 59. Is land that could qualify or would qualify for, but is not currently holding a chapter land designation. So I guess every piece of property in town that could whole chapter land designation does? Is that, I'm not quite sure how to interpret this, so I just kind
Right.
of want to understand.
It's a bit of a redundant classification of land because if it is chapter land eligible, typically it would be classified as chapter land, and we would encourage the property owner to apply for that tax benefit. If for whatever reason there was a piece of land that was not able to apply for chapter land for whatever reason, but is still open to public enjoyment and use, it would be considered open space. It would not be tax exempt. And so that would be the instance where the open space discount would come into play.
Okay, so, not to get in the weeds on this, but with chapter land, so there is a stipulation here, it's maintained in open or natural condition, contributes significantly to benefit. Oh, no, where's the reading? I'm missing it. There is a public use part here that you just mentioned. So, is chapter land open? Can you post chapter land? I mean, is chapter land open for public use or not?
No.
Okay, so that's the trade-off with chapter land. It's not available for public use, but the town gets right of first refusal. Here, it would be open for public use, but if we did have this exemption, the town would have no right of first refusal. Honestly.
I'll have to double check on that, but that sounds correct.
Yeah, okay, all right, I was just trying to figure out the nuances of the difference between the two. But anyway, I'd be, if you get a chance, Christian, I'd be interested to talk about that. I'm just curious, and it probably has no impact on anything, but it would be good to know for background.
Okay, I can look into that.
Further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'd make a motion to not recommend the residential exemption. The Board of Assessors voted 3-0 to recommend not adopting the residential exemption. So it applies, it's in community, it is used in communities where there are a lot of summer houses or rental properties, and people, owner occupied properties can get up to a certain percent of exemption on their real estate tax if the governing board in that community so votes. It's not, it doesn't apply much in our town. There aren't very many non-owner occupied seasonal housing in our town, and as you can see, only 15 out of 351 communities in Massachusetts have adopted this. So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The final vote is, in this case, the Board of Assessors voted 3-0 to recommend to not adopt the small commercial exemption. I would so move on that also.
Second.
And discussion on that. I must say, I don't understand this one very much. So a couple of sentences on this would be good, Christian.
Sure. So the small commercial exemption allows the board, the select board to adopt up to a 10% property value on the building for what the state qualifies as a small business under this exemption, which means a business on a property with 10 or less people and with a building value of less than 1 million. If there are more than one business on a property, all businesses need to fall under the 10 employees number in order for everybody to discount or to receive the discount. The issue here with West Newbury and adopting this discount is that it doesn't make that taxable value disappear, and it shifts it to other commercial and industrial properties. So since almost every property, business property in West Newbury would fall under this small commercial rule, you would not be shifting the money to a big box store down the road or something that might be able to absorb that tax hit from the small commercial properties.
So if we were to do that, that would put a real burden on the one or two or, very small number of businesses in town that would exceed that $1 million and 10 employee threshold.
It would move it to the industrial and personal property accounts mostly. Those would see a large jump in their checks.
Well, Rick is planning on putting a Lowe's on his property, so that's gonna.
Yeah, we're just working on the shared driveway.
Heard those permits are hard to get.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor of not using the small commercial exemption, aye?
Aye.
Thank you for explaining this in the memo, Christian.
No problem.
Very clear, yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
So with these votes and with this information, we now post everything through Gateway. And then it depends on how long it takes DOR to come back to certify the tax rate. We did, we've been aiming to get the, November 7th meeting. We weren't quite ready for that, but we knew it would be a quicker turnaround with DOR because a lot of communities, this is right around the time of year they got their tax hearing. So it might take them a couple of weeks also with the holiday, but we work with the treasurer collector on when she needs to know the tax rate in order to be able to make sure the tax bill that gets sent is based on the actual rate, not based on an estimated rate. And with tonight's vote on November 21st, there's about 5 weeks of time before she needs a number to get to the printers to print the tax bill. So we'll hear from DOR, well within that time frame. And once we know the tax rate is official, you guys will be the first to know. We'll post that on the town website as well.
So I think the public should know that again, these are estimates, not the actual, but the estimated increase on the sort of median property value household in the town. The tax rate is going to go down, the valuation of people's property has gone up, but what's the final outcome? So the median value household would see an increase of approximately just 2% in their property taxes, which is really a good testament to the way the town is running. We have just achieved a AAA bond rating. Our estimated tax increase is, if that's it, and it's going to be, it's not going to be exactly that, but it'll be close at 2%. So it's under Proposition 2.5, and so that's a testimony to the way that our employees, the boards and committees, voters at town meeting we're keeping expenses under control, and the town is running very well. It's a testimony to anyone, to everyone, the finance department, the finance committee, voters, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, we're, Christian, finding the values definitely helps with the tax rate, but what really matters the most is the tax bill. And so, yeah, we were really pleased to see the increase contained about 2%.
And all while paying for a new school. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we are drawing this year from the school stabilization, so, by my math, it's about 15 grand per penny on the tax rate, so we drew just short of 400,000, so, what's that? How many, 15 and then 400,000?
It's like 27 or 28.
So roughly, the tax rate would be about 27 cents higher if we hadn't made that draw. So, looking ahead 3 years, that's, which we're all well aware of, that well will draw, run dry. But for now, it's working just the way it was intended, which is to soften the impact of that in middle high school.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tristan.
Right.
Let's see, what is D? D is the discussion of the perhaps a review with the other towns of the Pentucket Regional School District Regional Agreement. I forget, it's either every 3 or 4 years. Is it 3 or 4? 3. 3 years, the charter of the agreement has not necessarily recommends, but the ability to go back and see if all the towns are happy with the tri-town agreement, and in the agreement we go over it, and if changes are to be made, then the 3 towns would have to agree to them at Springtown meeting, and would go into effect 2024. So we've had some preliminary discussion on this in the summer with representatives of some of the 3 towns informally, and now we're trying to sort of firm up the West Newbury's position on what we think might be tweaked a little bit. And then with us all in agreement, then we will have a meeting with the other 3 towns, so that again, we can try to get any changes that we think are necessary to be made uniformly at Springtown meeting.
And what I would suggest for tonight, Archie, is we've got a couple of different inputs. We have the 1-page memo that you had circulated back in early October. Then more recently, we have the 2-page memo from the FinCom that came out of their meeting last week, which had a few items that they uniformly agreed on. And then a member of the FinCom has some additional comments that are also part of your packet. So I think if, as you go through these, if you can say which of all of that you as a board support, and I'll just mark that on my hand, on my paper copy, and then my office will put together a red line based on what we hear tonight, bring it back 2 weeks from tonight for you to say, yeah, that's what we meant. And then coming out of the December 5th, we could then circulate a red line draft to the other communities, and they would have something tangible that's kind of very clear of what it is that you're recommending, if anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so are the finance committees, their memo, is that included in the comments of the individual member?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, so his comments.
So that's what I
Yeah.
couldn't, so where is the finance committee's?
It's
That's
a
the
2-page memo. at the
Yeah,
end.
so that's the, again, I'm kicking myself, I forgot page numbers, but that's this one that says, notes to select board regarding regional agreement, source to finance committee. So, yeah, a member of the FinCom had,
Oh,
provided
okay, that,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's of what Walt shared, these are the things that the FinCom coalesced around. And that doesn't mean some of what he shared isn't necessarily supportive, but they wanted to focus on, you know, some bigger picture items, and they highlighted really 3 sets of issues that they would, and they added also the capital threshold, which I think makes sense. And Wendy was at the FinCom meeting as well, so.
I personally think that the very first sentence is, and I could be completely wrong, but that paragraph B states that there shall not be less than 1 elementary school in each member town. And FinCon recommends that this be changed to there may be 1 elementary school in each member town. So that implies that there could be complete consolidation of elementary schools into 1 elementary school with simply changing one little word there. And I think that will be at all town meetings will be an absolute non-starter. I don't think anyone will vote for that. That there would be complete regionalization of the elementary school with longer bus rides and I just don't think that, and whatever, I just don't think that's I think that will immediately blow up any changes, the other changes that are recommended.
So, you know, notwithstanding what Archie just said, I don't know if that, I agree, I don't know if that would pass at any town meeting. I'm sure there are people who would support it, but I don't know if that would pass any town meeting, but it kind of ignores the fact that it says there may be 1 school in each town. Well, in fact, in Merrimack, currently there are 2 elementary schools. You know, there's the Sweetser and the Donahue. And so it's just the way it's phrased seems to ignore the fact that there already are 2 schools in one of the communities. So, yeah.
So there may be not less than 1 elementary school. I mean, it's just, I think that would be a wording change could address that, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, then that would there.
Well, then that's the same as what it already
Yeah,
is.
that's-
then. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying it could be
Yeah.
a wording correction to the point you're raising, if
Well,
Merrimack has to.
Right, but then if there may not be less than 1, then it. I mean, it sounds to me like what they're suggesting.
That's just
maybe
saying
there should
that the
be
negative
regionalization.
way or the positive way is shall, or not less than 1 is just, it's the same.
It's
It's
saying
the same,
exactly
yeah,
the same
yeah.
thing as there currently.
Yeah, maybe I chose the wrong word.
Yeah.
My point was just that wording could correct that. I mean, I think you're taking it to the extreme, Archie. How I view this is it's saying, you know, maybe 2 towns would, you know, work together if both towns needed a school. I think it's just allowing the opportunity if towns were interested in doing it. I don't necessarily see it that it's saying all the elementary schools are gonna be regional. That was the conversation anyway, at the FinCom meeting. That was just allowing the opportunity if towns so chose. Has that ever been discussed before?
No.
I'm just
And
curious.
partially because the history of the district was that the elementary schools were not even part of the region that was sort of step 3, you might say.
Yeah.
They weren't even part of the district for quite a long time. So that was like the regional middle school and high school were there way before the district decided to then sort of take over purview of the individual elementary schools also. So I don't the idea of regionalization of them, it has never, I don't think has really ever come up.
But I think maybe it should be left open for discussion. Personally, there were, again, I'm not advocating for it, but anything ought to be open for discussion. And the presentation we went to back, 2.5 weeks or so ago by the Pentucket superintendent showed class sizes in the 3 elementary schools and the inefficiencies in having 3 schools and trying to meet reasonable class sizes and being able to afford the staffing. So you had, some schools, most classes were essentially above the standard, above the goal. And that's a function of economics. There were places where the classes were within range and where if you were merging classes from grade levels from multiple schools, you'd have much more efficient class sizes. So you'd be able to better staff. And I think the point was also made that administrative costs would be substantially less. So even if it was just 2 schools together, 2 town schools together, it seems to me it would be worth something talking about and looking at. You might very well conclude that the consensus might be, no, we don't do that. But the consensus might be, it'll given the right location, right physical location, will do a fine job and allow the school to operate more efficiently. I mean, who knows where this Page School study is going to lead us?
Mhm.
So, personally, I think we should have as many options open to ourselves as possible.
I don't disagree. I just wanted to, any changes that we think about, I don't want it to be a 3-hour discussion at each of the town meetings, and I want the changes to pass, and I think that might I'm just wondering if that will cause it to be a red flag, and the whole thing will blow up. That's all. Okay,
Well, it might be worth discussing with the other towns. I mean, if we propose it, and
that's a good point. Okay.
I mean, we
Okay.
could say there may be at least 1 elementary school. Would that address your concern, Rick, or your point? We say there may be at least 1.
But that's what the change is recommended to be. Now it says shall, and we're just changing it to may.
No, but Rick's point was there may be 1 and Merrimack has 2 schools. So would saying there may be at least 1 instead of there shall be at least 1.
Right,
Well-
it's just,
But even then, I'm not sure if that's the right way to phrase it. There may be one.
we don't want to make it so that we're trying to tell them to shut one of them down. That doesn't make sense yet.
I mean, it almost seems to me as though there should just be some room for conversation if a community or two communities feel they need to have a conversation.
Right,
And, you know, so you could stay with, you know, there shall be, but you could have unless two or more communities. And obviously the only other alternative to two would be three. Unless two or more communities, I don't know, I think somehow we should leave the option open for
Okay.
communities to talk with each other.
okay,
Instead of having obviously, there would be other changes necessary if two communities decide to go together on a new school. But it just seems to me that the door should be open for conversation.
so then Angus, would we need to craft the words for this, or? is that-
I think we do our best to try to make it as clear as we could.
Okay.
We don't need to tonight, and whatever.
I
you
think
say
at
to the
least
town
is
says
the only way to make it, sounds odd, but that's the only way it makes sense. With the recommended change, yeah.
But yeah, anything that this board sends that's just gonna be a starting point, for the other towns anyway, so.
Yeah.
It's still a ways before things actually got typed up for town meeting and the lawyer reviews and all that.
Okay.
We could just try to make our language as clear as we can. I think the intent of what you're saying is clear. So it sounds like the majority would want to keep that in for discussion.
Yeah, okay. And, let's.
I have a question regarding, in the existing, and this is not brought up anywhere. Actually, it's underlined here. In such cases of emergency, refer to the Pentucket Regional School District contingency plan as approved by the Pentucket Regional School Committee and as may be amended from time to time. That, as far as I can tell, wasn't included in, it isn't like an appendage to the existing, regional agreement. And I confess I did go on the district website and search for a contingency plan. I don't know if it's there, but it would be interesting to know what that says. And
Yeah, Walt raised that issue as well.
yeah, what double underline here, what's the
That, I think you're looking at the appendix from what was voted when the changes were approved in 2019.
okay,
So yeah, and that was a big driver of
Addition.
that process. That was actually the primary driver of why Pentucket was really urging the changes.
yeah,
One of the main
it was
things.
after the flood,
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah, and they were basically looking to ensure that the school committee would have authority to make contingency plans in terms of reassigning where people were going to school.
Yeah.
For a period of time until town meetings were convened.
Yeah.
So this was to give them explicit authority to do that and make operational decisions that they might need to make in the event that one of the buildings became uninhabitable.
okay,
But yeah, the question of what contingency plan or plans have they approved, I'll request that from Justin.
okay, yeah, now I thought,
I
in
think
something
they
else
have
I've
done
read,
that.
I thought I saw reference to 1 year. But I don't recall where that was, but somewhere in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've read something that referred to an emergency and 1 year.
It said will be in place for not more than 1 year. Or until all towns have convened a special town meeting for the purpose of.
Oh, okay,
reviewing
where are you?
That's page 4 of Walter's comments,
Okay,
so it'll be section 4F.
again,
Yeah, if memory serves, I do think the school committee voted a contingency plan fairly promptly after that spring 2019 town meeting.
Yeah.
But I don't recall ever seeing it, so we'll see if we find it on the Pentucket website, and if not, I'll contact Justin and Greg and Brock and make sure that we have whatever they voted.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to.
So what about the regional finance committee?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what I felt too.
Yeah.
They're just saying it in a different way, but yeah.
So are you supportive of the idea of a regional finance committee for the?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
I guess the way it was phrased in here, it seemed to me as though it was becoming kind of a micromanaging. You know, sort of duplicative of what was supposed to be going on already.
but we're trying to eliminate. At least the way I saw it, we're trying to eliminate. The administration having to do. Present, by having that, we have the FinCom has a board member, we have a board member that can, excuse me, report back to their respective town boards and eliminate the need for the school committee and again, the district administration from having to do their dog and pony show every, 2-3 different times with sort of a lack of uniformity of the, not uniformity, but unanimity of the that you would, I think, better achieve by having one of a sort of regional finance board.
Mhm.
And to Angus's point was that he didn't think it was fair that all the information gathering for the various boards would necessarily have to come through him.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely creates a real pinch point because this is happening right in mid-March. Typically second or third week of March is typically when we get the budget proposal from the school committee. And at that point, we're right in the thick of our budget town meeting. And so if I get a huge amount of information from the Kentucky and I send it to you all, send it to FinCom, send it to anyone else who might be interested, and all those questions are now coming to me to ask them. Like, I would rather just, you get the information, just cut out the middleman, because I don't prepare the school budget. And yeah, I mean, I've talked to Pentucket about this, a number of times, and they, especially Greg LeBrecq, who's got the longest institutional memory, at least at the administration, has said that this language of this regional finance committee really dates back to when the school was almost in receivership and was really, there were serious financial management issues, and some of that could have been happening, wasn't happening, and that it was put in as kind of like a paternalistic type oversight group. And So they feel things have come a long way since then, and that there's not the need for that level of micromanagement. I don't think that's the intent of what I'm hearing from this board tonight, or what I heard from FinCom last week, or from what we heard we were out back in August. I don't think the intent is a micromanaging type thing as much as it is to have a shared forum to facilitate communication with the three towns in a way that ensures that every town's getting the same information at the same time and has the benefit of one another's questions and answers. So I think if it's implemented properly, I think it's a very constructive suggestion.
I mean, we even sort of did that informally last year, that when the other two towns were facing the override, and administration went the other way and invited, a member of each of the communities, select board, and I think a FinCom
We
person.
talked about a couple of summers ago, when they talked about the ESSER funds.
No, this was right before the budget was finalized, when they were because I went to a presentation by Greg and Justin on the with other towns there about the 2023 budget, and how we're going to pay for this, and it's very useful to know what the other towns are thinking. It's sort of good. We all get the same information at the same time from the district, but then the district can also hear what the collective three towns are thinking at the same time. I don't think it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's, I didn't mean to suggest, what it was, I'm actually looking at what Walt wrote, and it's one of the, it sounded as though, currently the school committee works with the superintendent. I don't know exactly what their mechanism is, but the school committee works with the superintendent, and they develop a budget. I assume that's done somewhat, in cooperation with each other. And it sounded, the way this is written, it sounded like the intent, and again, this is just in Walt's and not in the overall recommendation by the FinCom. It sounded like the intent was for this three-town team of, a select board member, a FinCom member, and maybe town manager, administrator, depending upon what the community, to be right in there in the fray and figuring out the budget. And I just didn't think that was practical. It struck me as too many cooks in the kitchen. But if it's really, if this regional finance group is more the message understander and conveyor of message, as opposed to being primary in the discussion, then to me that makes more sense.
It also depends on who it is.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of what everyone felt in the meeting we had this summer was, and Angus will agree to this, is that we're trying to prevent redundancies and maybe be more efficient, so that it seems like it would help the district to not have to do everything 3 times.
Right. Yeah, hopefully having representatives from all 3 communities in the same room at the same time, hearing the questions that each comes up with, you end up with a more thorough understanding. If you're listening to everybody else's questions and the answers, then hopefully everybody get some more thorough understanding of what's being proposed.
So it sounds like you're in agreement with that one.
Yeah,
So again, for the next meeting, 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have red line markups and we make sure that we're real clear on what you're saying. So the third point in the FinCom memo was on the withdrawal of member towns. Raising concern that that should require unanimous agreement. I think this is really a theoretical concern more than an actual concern. Because when you read what a town would have to accept in order to withdraw, they become personally, or their town becomes solely responsible for their share of the debt. So
Without any
middle high school for the next 27
Yeah, no,
years.
it's kind of a poison pill there already.
even
so,
with,
yeah.
even though they don't use it.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's, I do think it's a theoretical concern, but I think the logic of what they're saying makes sense. I don't know that it's worth going. with that.
You can go away, but you still need to pay us $40 million.
Right, yeah, I don't think that's gonna be a very strong argument for it. And then, they also raised a question about the capital, but let's go one at a time. Do you agree with your point on the withdrawal and pushing to make that unanimous or?
I don't think it hurts anything. Do you think there'd be?
I don't think it hurts, yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's theoretical, but.
Yeah, no, I think it makes logical sense.
Mhm.
So we'll include that one in there. And then the next one was the capital project. Archie had also raised that in his
Yeah.
memo about raising that threshold from 10 to 20,000. You all agree with including
Yes.
that in there?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it matches. Part of the justification, it makes sense that it matches what we consider a capital investment in town. Municipal.
Do you know if it's the same for Merrimack? and Groveland?
Well, they mentioned that it was not, but they like the idea.
Yeah, they like the idea, but they said they would need to change their bylaw to redefine a capital project
Do you know what it is?
as
Is it
10.
10?
Yeah,
And what
There's
about the
this-
year? Is it 5 years?
I don't know.
I think so,
And I think it was Carol Cloud who said that.
She
was
said
talking
it,
about
yeah.
Merrimack. I don't know.
She thought it was a good idea, but
They
they,
only changed it from 10 to 20 in the last 5 years or so. I
Right,
think it was
right.
not long before I started here
Yeah.
that she changed that. It's
I
not-
don't, actually, I did that quite a while ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Here,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
it just seemed to make sense.
So I would suggest if we turn back to Archie's memo and see what we.
But I was gonna say, Walt had one good point that I, at the very end here, page 6 of his thing. On 8A, so. In addition, the district shall provide the member towns with a maintenance plan for each of its buildings. So that actually, we all at the meeting, in the summer, everybody from every other town agreed, that they're not really sure that they get that. But the point is, from the district always, but January 15th is too late. This is sort of like after, basically, what did the district do over the past year? And you should get that in the summer. So, sort of not a prospective thing, but a retroactive thing on what did they actually accomplish? Because it helps us to know what improvement, obviously there's smaller things, they didn't replace the roof or something, but they may have done some electrical work that was done as a maintenance issue rather than as a capital expenditure that the town made. So we'd like to know what they actually did. So I actually think January 15th isn't the right time for that, but more like the summer sometime, August 15th or something.
So the capital plan is January 15th.
Yes, but so that's sort of like going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my one comment, that, you know, we're not getting the maintenance plan or the maintenance report. And I think somebody from Groveland commented that at the meeting we went to. I mean, I think that's important
Yeah,
that we have that information.
so how about, if we write it in such a way that talks about a maintenance plan for the subsequent year, maybe with that same, either January or even with the budget, but then also something more like August, or, you know, by September 1st or something, with a maintenance report for the prior fiscal year. So two things.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
And the dates. What were the dates?
I mean, it's whatever you want it to be,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking for the subsequent fiscal year, it could either be, you know, like January, or it could be when they propose their budget. Although they would have that part of it, they would have that done ahead of March, so yeah, maybe January 15th. And then a maintenance report of what they actually did for the prior fiscal year by like September 1st.
Yeah.
So
I
they
think
have,
that's good.
you know, a couple of months coming out of the fiscal year to kind of, as part of the year-end closeout, to put together a report on what they did the prior year. On that same page, we had talked about the capital plan by by January 15th as being really late in our process. Under our locally adopted capital process, I need to get the subsequent year updates November 1st. So I would suggest if we could change that to like October 15th. That way, you know, that only gives my office really 2 weeks to then build that into an overall updated capital program, which then takes 3 or 4 months to get through the capital process. But I think they would be amenable to that, and they made that effort this fall in giving us a 5-year, you know, kind of 7 months of a capital program in mid-October. We asked for that, and they did that, so I believe they would see that as a friendly request. But I think it's much more practical with our capital planning.
Yeah.
You know, in the unlikely scenario that if we first became aware of a capital request mid-January, and we had 2 weeks to get that under the warrant, all of that's really not ideal.
Yeah,
that's true.
So we could change that to October 15th. And we already did reinforce with them in a couple of meetings, the 5 years is very important to us. The 3 years, it just isn't really cutting. Especially when one of those years is always the current year.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
right.
And what they gave us this year was 5 years. They have it, they just like us, they have less confidence the further out you go, because there's, you know, a lot of moving parts, and there's only one Greg happened to figure it out. There's five buildings that got, you know, not a lot of bandwidth.
5 old buildings, well, actually, not 5 old buildings, now 1 brand new building with 4 old buildings.
That's right. Was there, everything else in Archie's memo seems, you know, pretty innocuous. You guys good with all of that?
Yeah, just the last one, 12A2,
Yeah.
change 1,000 to 2,000, 5,000. Which one would we want to change it to?
Somewhere there's a report that they have to tell us every $1,000 item that, which is, that's. really-
Right, so do you think it should be 2,000 or 5,000? You gave both options, I just,
I don't know which is better. I would say 5, to be honest.
so 5, so that would be a quarter of their budget for the year. Maybe 2,000 would be
What
better.
do you mean quarter of the budget? These are, these are maintenance items, aren't they?
Right, but
Yeah,
it's,
in
so
other
we
words,
say
if-
that under 20,000 is,
Well, it's capital, so that's a threshold for capital items, so.
so
that-
is there a threshold for maintenance or just all maintenance?
Well, Archie was saying apparently somewhere there's currently a requirement that anything over $1,000 they're supposed to list, is that what you said?
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
proposed budget.
Like, in other words, if they wanna put up a new whiteboard, that might be like, I don't think we have to know about every whiteboard. That's all I'm saying. It's
5,000 to me might be excessive because, so if you want to replace a new drive for a motor, that could. That might only be a couple of grand, but that's a significant component,
Mhm.
I mean, I think you could miss a lot of,
Okay, so
Well,
that's,
if you're
that's,
budgeting, if they're preparing a budget for the winter, they're thinking forward for the next 18 months. Every item, even 2,000, I mean, that could be, when you're dealing with a budget their size. How many computers, how many whiteboards, how many 2000s, anyhow, it's.
so I guess I should look at section 13A2, and I don't recall. Let me find
It's
that.
12A2.
12A2.
Page 8
Oh,
of
12A2, sir, yeah.
Walt's comments, if you want.
maybe for now, the suggestion could be, increase to something more realistic and then ask them.
I think
Like
that
to
would be-
respond, what would that look like at 2,000 or at 5,000 or some other number, and have some give and take with them on what's. We're not looking to create an administrative burden, we're just looking to have a clear understanding of what they're proposing. We're actually here looking to
Making it
actually make
easier.
it easier,
Right,
so.
So Angus, in the nuts and bolts of this, okay, we get one that we're happy with. We get to set up a time to talk with everybody else at some point.
Right. Yeah, I think the goal would be coming out of your next meeting to send something to your counterparts in the other 2 towns and to initiate a meeting. Either later in December or with the holidays, maybe soon after the first of the year. It would have to. It depends how far apart you are on, with the other towns as to whether it can move quick enough to get to the spring town meeting.
Okay, we all good?
I'm actually confused by what this currently says. I'm gonna read this sentence.
Okay,
Tell me.
where are you? What page?
I'm on, well, I'm in Walt's excerpt, and it's,
Okay.
but I'm looking at 12A2. And I'm just gonna read this one sentence, from the beginning of the sentence, okay, so upon request of the Finance Committee and or the Board of Selectmen of any member town, the Regional District School Committee shall arrange to meet with such Finance Committee and or Board of Selectmen for the purpose of discussing the proposed budget. Oh, okay, actually, so I missed the period there. Said proposed budget shall be submitted in the template approved by the school committee, itemized at least as follows: central administration, expenses of instruction, transportation, operation of school plan, maintenance of school plan, outlay, debt, and interest charges. The last name to specify all items costing $1,000 or more. What does the last name to specify all items costing $1,000 or more apply to.
Yeah, I assumed it was maintenance, but I guess it. could
No,
be interest
maintenance is
charges.
like 3 lines back, or 3 lines back, so I don't, yeah, it sounds like it refers to outlay debt and interest charges.
It does sound like that.
Yeah,
So I thought that we were talking about interest, I mean, about maintenance before, but now reading that, I don't think so.
I can't imagine, though, that there's any, debt that's gonna be $1,000. Central administration, treasurer.
So maybe like the semicolon section would be.
What does it mean? Does it mean $1,000 on any of those things?
I don't know.
I don't know. It just stood out to me that no wonder they don't want to make a report because it's too ridiculously
Yeah.
minute. Okay, we want to figure out what that sentence means, so that's one of our questions. Yeah,
Okay, we'll keep it on.
that's good, Rick. Yeah.
Ready to move on?
Yes,
Okay, we do have Brad Bashore, I believe that's the Brad that's on. And I thought he might be under the weather for tonight, but there's a Brad in our midst, so, but whether do you want to kick things off? For the West-
sure, so,
Yeah.
should I wait for Archie to get back?
Yeah.
No, all he's doing now, I'm gonna go refill my water too.
All right, so it's just me.
Yeah, so can you hold down the fort?
I moved.
So, all right, so, great, so Brad's just listening in.
Yeah.
Great.
Jeez, just you and me, I guess.
My computer's right here.
Oh, okay. Was that the 7th inning stretch?
That'd be good news out of the case, actually.
Still here,
We can only hope.
All right, so Whetstone,
yeah, you could start, you go ahead.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know how much you want to talk about.
Yeah,
so-
exactly. I didn't want to miss a second.
Yeah. So the question we talked about last meeting was the design change. So I talked to all the stakeholders involved and Brad explained that he made that change thinking it would be less impact on the wetlands. However, the Conservation Commission doesn't necessarily agree with that. It was also discussed at the CPC meeting last week, and the consensus there was that this is a major design change, and so that if we want to pursue this design, it would need to go back to the CPC and town meeting. I think, you know, I met with Christine this morning, you know, in terms of how to proceed from the town's point of view. And I think at this point, I think it makes sense for town staff to decide which design to pursue. I mean, they're gonna be in charge of permitting and constructing, and I feel like they need to have a bigger role than, volunteers. I personally favor the original design, but I think they should call the shots on how to move forward. I mean, there's a lot of factors that people have expressed to me, including the current design is over the water line, potentially more wetland impacts because the structure is lying in the wetlands, long-term stability of the timbers that the bridges are on, abutters concerns. So there's a fair number of concerns with the
What
current
were
design.
the other concerns?
What was the?
They haven't been addressed. So I guess that's my biggest thing. The original design, we worked pretty hard to get consensus from the Conservation Commission, Open Space Committee, Planning Board. And so that was the design that went forward, but this most recent design, none of that happened. And so a lot of people are feeling like, well, what happened? Nobody, proposed a new design, explain why it's necessary. So potentially, if this design is less impactful on the wetlands, we just need to do a better job informing the interested parties so that everyone feels like they have a stake in it. So Christine's thought was she would get together like a design team, her, the conservation agent, Sam Jocelyn. She proposed having me on it. I don't feel the need that I need to be on it. I think the town staff are more than qualified to figure out how we should proceed.
My other question is, if we're having more boardwalk, it's got to be more expensive, right, or not?
I would think so. Yeah. The design for the original design, it wasn't resting on beams on the ground. It was on, 4x4 posts. So I think it would be less expensive. Brad pointed out in his email that there's only 40 feet less of boardwalk, but I think the construction cost for the type of bridge that's being proposed would be higher.
Okay.
And do we have reason to believe that one will be longer lasting than the other?
I would think the post would be longer lasting. That was the conservation agent's concern. If the beams are lying in the mud, in the wetland, how long will that last before they need to be replaced?
Or shift. Yeah.
So the wetland flags have to be replaced anyway, so the Concom process is slowed down a little bit. So Christine was going to get with those other staff members and figure out the design going forward. We have a proposal from Greg Hockmuth to do the engineering support work. And so I think that's a good way to go forward.
Okay, I mean, I'm not gonna argue the point on the construction method. It's just, it doesn't necessarily seem so sure to me that, so now instead of, well, they were like 8x8s or 10x10s, they were very, I think they were referred to as mud sills. The mud sills were pretty big blocks. And 4x4 posts, I mean, they're still sunk in wet soils. And I've seen 4x4 posts that have reached the end of their life. And I'm not so sure that that's a more robust and longer lasting construction. I just don't know.
Yeah.
And what?
I'm
I'm sorry, I missed
Then
something.
the mud sills. Because
Oh.
the mud sills are essentially then a sacrificial component when they do fail. You lift the section because it was designed in sections. You lift the section, you replace the mud sill,
Right.
and which I expect would be simpler than replacing posts. That was my gut, but
In either scenario, those, any repairs like that would need to be permitted again, is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the other concern.
you mean when they had to be done, the repairs would have to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, but all I can tell you is that with today's materials, none of us are gonna be worried about it.
Okay, all right.
Well, that's good, because there was a concern.
Okay,
Raised.
yeah, I don't know anything about.
So
this.
are the posts gonna be pressure treated? I'm just getting
Oh,
into
I would
the,
assume so.
getting into the weeds or like, ASICS boards that might last for a very, very long time.
Yeah, that's not real stiff though, that AZAC. You know, I mean, AZAC is like a hollow. It's not real dense and it's not stiff. I've never seen it used for posts. I'm not. This is not my specialty, but I've never seen that type of.
I haven't seen it for posts either, but I didn't know if it's available or
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
Well, that was another of Christine's points, that we should probably have a structural engineer do this and have a design and, you know. Because we are, you know, if it's an ADA compliant, we're gonna have, you know, hopefully lots of traffic on it. And
Yeah.
we wanna make sure that's up to whatever standards structural engineers deal with. So that's where it stands, if the board agrees.
Yeah,
then we just
yeah.
have town
I mean,
staff.
I think, you know, I think what Brad had done before is taken design that was approved by a very credible agency. You know, was it California, you know, Division of Parks or something like that, and use their standard design. This is the way I interpret it, and, you know, this is just my interpretation, so it's, you know, subject to correction. Thanks, I needed that. But, you know, it was, you know, a design used by an agency that, you know, is credible, and trying and applying that here.
Yeah,
So,
no, the
yeah.
design is perfectly fine.
Yeah,
It's just whether
yeah.
it's the right one for this application.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was sort of going back to the structural stuff, so it's fine if it, you know, if the consensus is that it ought to be post, then, yeah, we ought to have somebody who's a structural
Mhm.
type person design it.
So I didn't see, design costs in the Hawkwood proposal.
No, that was something that we
Okay,
discussed today.
Right, good, okay.
So she was gonna reach back out to Greg and ask
Good.
if his firm could provide the design engineer, or I guess there's somebody that she and Wayne are working with that
Okay,
potentially could do it.
okay, great.
The other factor is the current design requires a wetland replication area, which would be ongoing monitoring, and so it's just more of a burden for the town to take on. Whereas originally the design that was discussed with the Concom, they did not propose wetland replication, but that. would be
Because
different.
the posts and because there was more lighting underneath and.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So you just had the 4x4 hole.
Yeah.
Every 8 feet rather than something laying in the.
yeah, okay.
But, you know, it's been 3 years, so I don't know that the commission will react the same, so.
Okay.
So does that approach sound good to have
Yeah.
town staff
Sure.
take charge of this and?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Is that all right? with
Yeah,
you?
yeah, we had also talked about, you know, funding source, the town, the board did accept a gift of a contribution of $10,000 from the developer, of the adjacent subdivision. Those funds would be available to support a design or permitting work without getting the CPA allocation.
So that has not been touched.
Nothing's been touched, not a dime has been spent on this to date, which hopefully that, I don't know if that's been cleared up. I did hear some butter comments that the town's been spending all this money on this. The town hasn't spent a dime on this, so.
Well, that's because we've had people volunteer.
No, I understand, yeah, but still, that's,
Yeah.
that's not correct information.
Yeah.
I hear it being said by the town committee that I
Yeah.
would think would know what they're talking about before they go saying things like that. Okay, so,
The CPA funds allocated were 30,000.
yeah,
Yeah, and did you say permitting was not part of that?
correct.
Yeah,
It was-
so-
Yeah, it shows 0 in
Yeah,
the,
so I think we need to use the 10,000 instead of that, just.
right, Right. Yeah, I mean, the question came up for the cost for the NOI, just a legal ad. I didn't want to hit the CPA. I didn't want to touch that account. So actually, so that's like $220. We did pay that a week or so ago for the legal ad. And I thought that could I actually thought the select board professional technical services would be a reasonable account to hit with that notice of intent. So that's the only monies that have been expended so far.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
All right, item F, preliminary discussion of the FY24 budget policy direction. So what we started a year ago, we're now dealing with we just heard tonight the preliminary estimate of the tax rate and how it will go forward for the permanent assessment to property owners in the town in FY23. So now we want to just sort of have a philosophical discussion of how we want to deal with the FY24 budget, even though we're sort of still haven't completed thinking about 23, but it takes a long time. So now we have to decide where we're going to go with FY24. So the template that we have, I think, is pretty good for what we've been using the last 3 or 4 years, and I would.
We can strike number 2 at this point.
Yes,
hopefully.
please.
Exactly. But I don't think we need to even go through it now. I just want people everyone to think about where we want to go for FY24 and sort of use this as a template. And one thing that is on here that we do have to start thinking about is what to do with our ARPA funds. So that's an important big chunk of money, and it's not going to be there forever, and we do have to
So the
sort
end
of
of,
think about that.
end of FY24, is that it?
No, I think 20.
25.
Oh, 20.
I think it's 26.
Okay.
Okay, you might be, it might be 26. Okay. So let's
So,
not.
yeah, this was really put on really as a preview because it'll be on 2 weeks from tonight. It'll be really a primary item 2 weeks from tonight. So we wanted to include last year's just to kind of prime the pump, get you thinking about it. And then for specific issues that you either might want to revisit in here, or new ideas that you have, if you send me any notes ahead of time, and then we can make sure that we have whatever information you need in the packet. So for instance, ARPA, I'll put in some more information on that for the next meeting. If there's other things that you want, just to help make sure that we can really dig into it 2 weeks from tonight. It is really, last year it was, you can see December 20th when this was voted, and ideally we can get something done 2 weeks from tonight, because that's something I send around.
Actually, that says 21, so we didn't change the date.
No, yeah, that was December 2021. Was a year ago.
Okay, all right.
I know it feels longer ago.
Yeah. So I know we started it early December, but I think we went to a second meeting. So I think if we can get our thoughts clear and get it done December 5th, that's the more time I can give to departments and boards and commissions. I include this in my budget package that I send around to everyone. So it's really good to have it done.
And look at item 1, we didn't want to go over 2.5, and we went under 2.5, probably.
Well, the expense budget increase was more than 2.5, but with the change in values and with the some of the one-time revenues, whether school stabilization and free cash, the net bottom line was, the tax impact was less than 2.
But that's what's really important,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So one thing I'm interested in is, to limit the amount of excess free cash that we would have next year. If there's a way, for the departments that have to estimate their expenses, is there a way to tighten that up? I mean, I don't know what information would be needed to try to figure that out, and maybe rely on the FinCom reserve fund for if they find that they're short. Is that reasonable?
So I did, leading into last week's FinCom meeting, I fully expected to be grilled on turnbacks. So I actually spent a lot of time leading up to last week's meeting, preparing for like a detailed, I went through every turnback above anything other than a negligible amount,
Mhm.
and actually did an analysis.
Oh, you did?
I did. It didn't end up coming up, but I'm ready. I can.
Can you send that to us then,
Yeah.
to look at?
Yeah, I mean, it was for my talking points. It wasn't like a formal written memo,
Mhm.
but yeah, I have.
Yeah, that's-
I have.
So
information about-
let me, before you say too
Yeah.
much. So now you're gonna get people you're gonna get department heads, you're mad at me because I turned back too much money. That's exactly the wrong
Well, and
message.
we did talk about that at FinCom last week. I told
Jeez.
FinCom that I've worked in towns where the culture was that you knew if you underspent your budget, that you were gonna get squeezed the next year. There are towns that operate that way, and.
That's
it's
what
not
they're
good,
trying to do.
Because what it creates is people going on a spending spree in June to spend down their budget to make sure they don't give anything back because they don't want to get squeezed the next year.
So I wasn't asking.
See, that's what I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want.
So Archie, understand, I wasn't asking that to cut it. I just think that having the three of us, better understanding we have, then when somebody else asks us, the better response we get.
Mhm.
And there are.
Oh, okay,
In
Yeah,
most,
I'm not trying to-
in most
yeah.
of the lines, there's really good understandable reasons. I mean, one example that was significantly underspent last year was recycling.
Mhm.
And if you go back to what the recycling market conditions were in February, March of 2020, which was when the FY for 2020, 2021, which was when the FY 22 budget was being brought forward, it was very volatile. And so Board of Health budgeted, based on their best guess, and they built in some conservatism. So that was a great example where, there's 24 lines, so I can go through all of them with you at the next meeting, or I can send it right out, and then once you have questions about it, we can dig into those.
But the FinCom is also, a lot of the people there have not been on the FinCom for very long.
Right.
So they don't know that these are recurring things that usually always happen. And it's not a symbol of bad budgeting. We're just doing it. It drives me bananas. It drives me bananas.
I feel the same way, but at the same time, it's the people's money, and they have every right to understand, what was underspent, why was it underspent. I'm happy to do that. It does take time, and it is the same conversation over and over again. Within those lines, there were one or two where, there wasn't really a good answer, and I think we can squeeze those lines, and not have any consequence of that. So that's good. So I think, that's something we can delve into. One of the things I know we've talked about.
But Angus, I don't want people, the department heads to have the vibe that the finance people in the town are annoyed with them because they didn't spend all their money. They should be congratulated. They're making it a negative.
It's both.
Will you give them the FinCom that
Yeah.
message
Yeah.
from me? Because
I will.
I've been on the FinCom a long time before any of them did that.
Yeah.
And it's the same, usually the same budgets. And if they're underspending their budget, why is that a bad thing?
And many of them, you know, it's because there was understaffing in the department. I mean, Conservation Commission was underspent in FY 22 because the agent didn't start until late September. That's almost a quarter of the year. The position was vacant. Once you explain these to people, most of them are, oh, yeah, well, of course, oh, that makes sense. So I do think it is a little tiresome, but it's also hopefully by going through that helps people to not ask the same question every year. And there are, you know, a couple of things that I think we can tighten up. For the most part, there's, you know, things are budgeted pretty tightly. But let's take, for example, something like fire, where we don't know going in how many calls there are going to be, and we would all agree we need to budget to ensure we can pay our firefighters if there are calls. So that's one that every single year is going to be, you know, it's basically been a COLA budget for at least the 4 years I've been here, and I think longer than that. They just carry it forward for COLA. Very often it's underspent by tens of thousands of dollars, maybe 40 or 50 or $60,000. That's not a bad thing because we need to have that. But one thing we could talk about, which I think gets to the question you were asking, Wendy, is there a different way to carry that money so that it's there when you need it, but it's not a, you know, we're not raising it from taxes, giving it back, or returning it free cash every single year. And I know I've talked with you guys before about in Maine, we had reserve funds, which were for that purpose. We had a council form of government, so they could approve reserve funds every other week, rather than here, it's a town meeting vote, so it wasn't as clean, but that is something, you know, I continue to ask kind of auditors and accountants, is there some way to appropriate, and I think there would be, if you had the political will. I mean, let's say you approved a town meeting article this spring of $100,000 to put into a firefighting reserve fund. And that was going to be available with no sunset date to pay unbudgeted responses resulting from fire and emergency response. And then maybe you cut your fire budget by 30 grand. And then let's say in mid-May, you've spent it down and there's a fire in late May, and you're not going to not send the firefighters. You're always going to do the same thing in terms of emergency response, but in terms of how you pay for it, at that point, the accountant and I would assign those costs to this article, not to the other.
I hate it.
Well, it doesn't.
The cost of money, there's a cost of money, right? So you put that $100,000,
You're tying
and
it up.
it's just sitting there, and you're not earning any
Well,
money.
actually,
Well, in the bank, you're.
Well, you're earning pathetic, you're behind inflation, and the people now are paying for, the people existing in the town right now are paying for fire protection 4 years from now. I hate it.
It's a different way to do it.
Well, I'm just asking for information. I'm not saying we have to do it.
That's the only other way I can think of.
Yeah, so the FinCom Reserve Fund, what, isn't that for,
Yes,
because I remember the Board of Health, they
Yes.
said they cut their budget back and there was a commitment that if you need it, we'll reserve,
And-
we'll transfer. it.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and if.
So
yeah.
last year, we had budget
Yeah.
turnbacks and we had the FinCom Reserve Fund transfer, or turn back.
There's almost always turned back.
Yeah, so let's not keep doing that if we're not gonna budget. to it.
I think the only concern I think departments would have, and it's a real concern,
Yeah,
is whether when the time comes, how many hoops are they gonna have to jump through? How much second guessing is there gonna be?
yeah, that's fair.
Will the FinCom actually even vote it at the end of all of that?
Mhm.
I think it's a cultural question more than, you know, legal question. I mean, the FinCom could certainly do that. And backstop the budget, and that's really what that's for. But if it's gonna mean going to 2 or 3 meetings and writing all these memos, and when the departments are really, as you know,
Mhm.
really busy,
Yeah.
they're just trying to do their job, just trying to run their department. Jumping through hoops, going to multiple meetings, getting, you know, potentially spoken to in a you know, negative way, it becomes you know, there's a cost to that too.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
I think that the two ideas functionally become equivalent, because say if you have a turn back of $30,000 at the end of the year from fire. And if instead, say you had a $30,000 reserve fund. As you're distributing that turn back or putting that turn back in as free cash, returning it as a free cash, a tax, a contribution to reduce tax. At the same time, you're refilling that out of the current year's tax money. So, as you're giving money back, you're refilling with current year tax money. So to me, it's kind of a wash which one you do. I think the most efficient way would be if there was an omnibus reserve fund that could cover multiple, because the chances of them overlapping the same year, is very low probability. So if you had one fund that could in any year be used to cover excess, over budget requirements for 3 or 4 or 5 different individual accounts or funds, that would make more sense, because then
But we already have that. The reserve fund can cover any.
but as you said, then the individual department heads have to go on bended knee to the FinCom.
So would you
and
just
hope
have the
that they
town
charge it.
manager?
Huh?
Would you just have the town manager approve the?
To me, that would make sense.
But you have, so you have, I don't understand. So then you have to have a bigger reserve fund. So you have to raise the money. What's the difference between the fire department raising the money and a bigger reserve fund?
Because the reserve fund is capitalized once and then drawn down potentially over 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then you replenish it, as opposed to if it's in the office.
No, it would have to have its 100,000 in it every year.
I don't know. It would have to have enough in it.
It depends upon what's drawn on.
Yeah, if it doesn't end up getting drawn off, it's gonna, you learn about what's the.
It doesn't matter. It's all comes from the same place.
If it doesn't matter, can we just talk about it? Can we just get the information so that we? can
But
be
I
educated?
don't understand why you want to change something that isn't broken.
Yeah, I personally don't have a problem. I just threw that
I'm
out.
not looking to change anything. Although there is one thing we would like to do with.
No, but let me say that. Okay, if you have to read, all I'm saying is the same amount of money gets spent and it has to be raised somewhere. Do you want to raise it 100, 200,000, whatever it is, in 1 year and then not raise it the next 2 years, or do you want to raise 50,000 4 years in a row? What's the difference? The difference is that the people in the first year that are living here get hit more than the people in the 3rd and 4th years. But it's the same, you still spend the same amount of money.
Mhm.
We're not saving anybody any money. I just think we have, I don't see why it should be. I just don't get why it makes more sense to make it in one big block once. It's still gonna be, there's still gonna be, if there's a fire, they're still gonna need it, whether, I don't know, I'll shut up, but.
There is one change that I can give a little snippet of now, and but that I've been talking with FinCom about for 4 or 5 months, that I think they really have embraced and they like this idea. And if you all like this idea, I think it would actually help with the turnbacks issue, and it would definitely help hugely with the line item transfers. So let me see if I can make this simple, because I didn't think through a presentation, but this is so when we in my last job, the budget that was advertised, that actually went to the newspaper, we did newspaper ad, was basically similar to what you see here on the screen. It didn't have all the priors, but it was by department. Rather than all the breakdown of like by line. And we had line item transfers up there as well. But if they were within the department, I as town manager had the authority to approve that. It only needed to go to the council if it was from one section of the budget to another. That's how I know it works in Ipswich, the town manager, it only goes to the finance committee if it's from one section of the budget to another. But if let's say, let me take a good example, like DPW's got a bunch of lines in their budget. Let's say they're okay, so DPW, you see they have, I don't know, about 13 different lines. So let's say they're on track to overspend town building operating expenses. As long as the department head is able to underspend some other line so that the bottom line of DPW is held, that wouldn't necessarily need to go to FinCom. And so the FinCom asked me about this early on. They said, why are all these line item transfers? And I said, well, the reason is you have so many lines of the budget. That's why. And by state law, it does have to go to FinCom if it's going from one line to the other. So I said to them, the way around that, or the way to deal with that, and make it not as administratively burdensome for everybody involved with these line item transfers, is if the budget as voted by the legislative body, by town meeting, had 36 lines, to like that summary sheet, instead of 230 lines or whatever the number is, then as long as those, as long as I work with the department heads to hold the bottom line of each section of the budget, you wouldn't need line item transfers. That would allow, I think, over time, some these lines would be backstopping one another, so that, so if there were elective, expenses, whether that was conferences or whether that was a new printer or something, like that, maybe that's not the year for it. If the elevator broke down and you had to spend more than you expected on that. So there's kind of some internal redundancy within each section of the budget. And what I had suggested to the FinCom would be a way to do this, which I think wouldn't be, a political problem, is if the budget presented, for the vote of the town meeting was something in this summary form that you see, but all the detail was still in the appendix, so everybody can still see the line items they're used to seeing, and they can still see the multi-year trends they're used to seeing, but what they're actually voting would be basically the cover sheet. I think that would solve the problem. And I think you'd have a lot fewer line item transfers. I don't know that it would immediately change, the whole turn back issue, but I think over time it could, because it would help have some of that internal redundancy.
I like that approach. I mean, is that something we could just implement?
We could, yeah. There's nothing that prescribes how. In fact, I mean, in Ipswich, they vote their budget by category. General government, public safety, education, DPW, human services, debt service, and benefits, all of which are prescribed by the state. Those are all kind of uniform. So they have like 7 lines in their budget. I mean, that's really coarse.
Yeah.
This is core third, but still fairly granular. So I think it's just custom. I know it's just custom of how West Newbury has formatted the budget. So we can present the same detail in the appendix, but have it clear that the voters are voting, per department.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, it used to be like 15, 20 years ago, there were frequent line item holds at town meeting.
Sure.
And they almost never happen anymore. And which tells me that almost nobody is looking, there were actually 14 line items there, I think, for DPW. almost nobody is actually going through every single department, looking at all the, I mean, that's. You know, nobody does that.
Yeah,
Um,
but it would still be good for like the town manager to see how they come up with that.
Oh,
budget.
absolutely, and that's why, but as Ang said, that could be in the appendix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would certainly be part of what goes
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
FinCom
yeah,
process,
yeah.
because they want to see that detail.
And if it's in the appendix of the FinCom packet, then the info's there. Would it be in, is it, when you say in the appendix, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's-
so it would be still publicly available
Correct.
information. It's just we would be voting on it that way, and that way, you know, things, you know, when you have multiple variables, they tend to even, you know, to balance each other out.
Mhm.
I mean, they can go a little high, they can go a little low, but in general, they balance each other out. Which is what you're talking about.
Right, yeah, I mean, I brought this up in the first meeting I had with Gary Roberts in either July or August of 2018, our very first meeting. Because I had seen the budget that you guys had just voted in April 2018. I shared with him the budget I presented in Hamden that very same fiscal year, which I found much clearer, much more complete, and much more detailed. And we had line items, for instance, DPW, we might have had 30 something. We had a different line item for tires than we had for plow edges. I mean, it was, and it broke down specifically how many tires we were gonna get, what they were gonna cost. And that, in conservative central Maine, they loved that. They needed that because they wanted to know where every dollar was going, and we were happy to provide it. And I said to Gary Roberts and summer, my first summer, I said, if I was not so hamstrung by this line item transfer, I would be happy to give you this level of detail, but I can't. I would be tying myself and my staff in knots because, you know, first of all, you need FinCom and select board approval for a line item transfer. And you can't seek it until May or June of the fiscal year. So you're literally tying yourself in knots. You can't do it. But I told him if we didn't, you know, if we were more, you know, if I had authority to approve line item transfers within a section, we could break it down much, you know, as much as, you know, I mean, within reason, but you know, we tracked phone separately from, I mean, every expense was like itemized in the budget.
I want to know how many 1/4-inch washers you got.
We generalized at some point, but I, you know, it was a very different, very clear. I think the budgets I've done in the 4 years I've been here, I think have been clearer than what you used to have. But they're still not, in my opinion, as clear as the budgets I did up in Maine. And the reason is the law. It doesn't, it would be disastrous here to give that level of detail. Not because of anything political, but because of the practicality of it, the line item transfer. So anyhow, FinCom has embraced this idea. And if you get these, it seems like you get, you know, you like the idea too, maybe we put that in to, well, just that one. Oh, you have a question?
Oh, I don't like it. No.
Oh, you don't like it? Okay. All right. 7 items, No,
the lack of transparency will be horrendous.
No, I'm saying like 36 or however many lines. No, I'm saying if switch goes even further, I'm not suggesting that. No, you would vote it, you know, there'd be 1 line each for each of the.
Conservation, planning.
Rather than the breakdown of, but you'd still have the information in the appendix. It just wouldn't be what the legislative body voted. So someone could still put a hold on, you know, planning board, and in their hold, they could say, hey, I'm seeing the salary and wages is going up 9%. What's driving that? They would still have that. But when it's voted and when the town clerk does the report of the expenditures, it would be, you know, this bottom line budget would be 36 lines rather than 240.
I know, but you've got police department, $1 million there with no breakdown.
The breakdown would still be in the FinCom.
I know, but then people are gonna have to go, they're not gonna like this.
That's fine, but
I
that's
think we
fine.
should try it.
It's, you know.
I
it's
mean,
just
we're
an idea.
counting our employees, the department managers, to manage their department. I mean, I don't feel like, you know, we need to nitpick every line item.
You,
make sure
you
that-
like transparency
This
and
is
you're cutting
totally
it out.
transparent. It's just in the back of the book instead of in the front. And it means less work for the finance staff. to
And well, and we're also, we're moving toward providing, so every month, the town accountant runs a report of the month and expenditures and sends that around to every department. Once obviously we hired a new town accountant tonight, once we're back to staff, we haven't done this in the last 6 or 8 weeks because we just don't have the people, but what we've said to FinCom is we're happy to send them those monthly reports, so they get a monthly report, and that's with the full, breakdown by, with every line, so they're gonna see, which I've sent them year to date, I've sent them 3 or 4 so far this year, just not monthly. But that's all, that gives total transparency on what's been expended from every budget line. It wouldn't change how the accounting works, it would still be charged to that line. It's not like it would be charged to a single expense line. We wouldn't change the chart of accounts. We would just roll up those sub accounts into the primary account for each department. So it's something we can talk about more at the next meeting, and maybe in your budget direction, you say, present it both ways to you when I present the budget, late January, and then you decide what you want to go in the warrant. Because I do think it's better, and it's definitely administratively, cleaner. I mean, we do spend, dozens of hours of staff time in June and July doing line item transfers, like dozens of hours.
I can't believe that. There's like 10 total.
But there's back and forth with the departments and with the town accountant, and with going to FinCom, assembling all the documentation, running the reports, going to the meetings, it all adds up. So it's just a suggestion that would make us more efficient. There's trade-offs in all of this, but I think if we did what I'm talking about, of still including the full detail people are used to seeing in the FinCom booklet, it would still, they could, it's just a matter of form of what they're actually voting.
It would be good if the department heads understood, it would be good to get feedback from department heads. At least those who have a few years' experience, as to whether or not that would allow them to. Maybe not the first year, but the second or third year, give a budget with less buffer built in, because the buffer could be spread over any of the line items. I mean, because unless the department has gone completely over their total budget, which I think is pretty rare. Is that true?
I don't know. I think it's rare, but it's not without, it does happen. It depends on.
I mean, in that case, then it would have to go to FinCom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I have a list of, I mean, I could, if I looked at line item transfers from the last 3 or 4 years, and just said which of those, I mean, you remember some from last spring were from one line within DPW to another line.
Right,
within DPW.
right.
And that's where the conversation started with the current FinCom, because they said, why do we even need to vote on this?
Right.
And I explained to them why. It's because of how the budget's formatted. So,
Well, quite honestly, why do we spend, net time by the time all's said and done between reading it in the packet, discussing it at a meeting? Why do we spend an hour or more?
On the transfers?
Yeah, on transfers that, maybe not everybody will agree, but I think legitimately could be done without our weighing in at all.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, just today, we got this year's invoice from Essex Ag, and it's $524 above what we budgeted. So, Jenny's put that into a folder for a line item transfer that will apply for in May or June. In the meantime, it's going to show us overspent by $524. Now, that's one that, is still, we would still need to do even in this new scenario, because it's not covered in the education budget, but it's a trivial amount of money. And it's because the transportation costs were higher than what they thought they would be last February, March, when we were preparing the budget, so. Anyhow, so we can, if there's other things, especially if there's new ideas that you want floated for the FY24 policy direction, if you send me a note, maybe first part of next week, if there's any backup or anything that you'd like to understand, just to give a little lead time to prepare for that.
So what about your idea about the debt, rolling that into? You're talking about the school stabilization fund?
Right,
Would that be like a budget idea?
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, so basically the 300.
You mean the retired debt?
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, the 301,000 that's part of this year's budget
that's pretty cool that,
will be gone next year.
that's gone, yeah.
Yeah, it's unheard of. The water department still carrying that, and we've obviously got our share of the Kentucky debt and so on and so forth, but in terms of town of West Newbury debt, it's just about paid off. My credit card bill's higher now. When July 1st, I'm gonna have more personal debt. Maybe I'll pay them off by then.
Good luck.
Rick had shared some information this afternoon. I didn't know if you wanted to get into that tonight, or if you wanted to chew on that some more.
Yeah, well, I just kind of threw out a question today with the additional info that I sent it.
I don't think I saw the additional information.
Yeah.
So what's that, Rick?
Well, I got feedback from, let me find the email, and so I can put the numbers. So under the new rate structure, the EV charging stations are going to be billed by National Grid at about 44.2 cents per kilowatt hour. We're going to be getting, the town will be receiving a net credit for the Main Street solar production of about 33.7 cents per kilowatt hour. That's, I say net credit because we pay Amoresco a low price for the energy, and we get a credit from National Grid at a high price for the energy. It's a great deal. So our net credit will be, based on, what I've received should be, I believe, about 33.7 cents per kilowatt hour. That system produces about 80%, a little bit over 80% of the total electrical demand that the town has. Most of the town's electrical demand is billed at the same rate as the EV charging station bill is at, or stations are at. So, my question is, Main Street solar installation provides slightly more than 80% of the municipality's energy usage. Without getting too deep into the numbers, the bottom line is that the town's aggregated net electric supply costs, after accounting for the Main Street solar credit, will actually decrease for this next 6-month period. That is meaning that the credit will increase more than the aggregated costs will increase. So in other words, the town will benefit from the higher electric rates. Not something we want to brag about. So notwithstanding the note below, where I suggested that maybe we should revisit that 35-cent rate that we currently charge for that is the cost for charging. Should the town further incentivize residents and possibly town staff's transition to EVs by continuing with the current 35 cent per kilowatt hour charging rate. So that's my question is, the town is, almost perversely gonna be making money on everybody else's paying, not at their expense, but, we're gonna be benefiting from that. And so instead of, increasing that charging rate, maybe we should just keep it where it is. So now that I've said that, I'm not gonna say anything more because I am charging right now. And I'm not gonna vote on this.
Okay,
Okay, if there is a vote.
so what difference in, based on the usage that was in the packet, the total usage, I mean, what difference would this allowing it to stay the same make, in aggregate?
That's an impossible thing to answer because if the town is now offering charging at 35 cents a kilowatt hour and somebody can charge at home at 45 cents a kilowatt hour,
Assuming it stayed the same,
they might,
okay.
say that again?
I was proposing, assuming the usage stayed the same as it has for the last.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe it costs the town $25 a month.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's.
That's
just
if
some
it
kind of
stays the
sense.
current rate.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a ballpark number, but
Yeah.
it's not a big number.
yeah. Well, I think we should do it. I mean, it's not gonna cost the town any additional money. Right?
Well,
And we
Yes,
encourage
yes,
it.
yeah, it will.
$25 a month?
That's a really coarse, maybe it's $50. I don't know. It's not, I'm sure it's way under 100. I mean, the bills for those currently is, they're not being used as much as you might like. So
Yeah,
actually, if you put them all together, maybe, I was thinking per station. But maybe if you put them all together, maybe it is $100 to $200 a month. I didn't,
I don't, so I'm trying to think this, so if we're currently charging 35 cents,
yeah,
let's say, just for discussion, that we went to the 44.
so it's another 10 cents a kilowatt
Another
hour.
10 cents a kilowatt hour, so I'm saying 294 kilowatt hours.
Okay, so that's $29.40, yeah.
mhm, for all
Okay.
four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there'd be a certain logic to go to what we're being charged. To go from 35 cents to 44.2 cents. And just index it to whatever the actual rate is. But if, as a policy matter, you wanted to subsidize the purchase of the charging, then keeping it the same would have that effect at a modest cost, so.
Yeah. So, at some point it becomes a question of wording. Are you subsidizing? Are you incentivizing?
Mhm.
Or are you doing both? But,
I feel like we should have a sense of how much it's gonna cost
yeah,
before we make the decision. I mean, even if it costs $200.
well,
maybe
we just, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's about,
Okay,
I think it's about 10 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming you went to the 44 or 45, let's say, was it 45 cents?
Yeah.
10 cents a kilowatt hour. And so, just under 300 kilowatt hours last month. We had a 3-month report was 1,085, so,
mhm.
350. So $35.
So
35 bucks a month.
And
so,
that's being compensated for by the net credit, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, in terms of, so in either scenario, the town is gaining revenue
Mhm.
because of the, solar credit. So in neither scenario is it actually subsidizing the users of the EV stations. Is that right, Rick?
I'm sorry, say that again?
In neither scenario is the town actually subsidizing, because once the solar is factored in, the town is benefiting in either scenario, even at the
Right.
current lower rate of 30
Right.
cents.
Right, so assuming my numbers are right here. Looks like, our rolling average right now is a little bit less than 600,000 kilowatt hours a year. And the difference between the rate the town pays and the rate the town is credited is going to be a little over 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So, what's that? It's-
200,000, no,
No, it's like 30 cents, 600,000 times
0.3,
0.3. So,
that's 180,000.
that can't be right.
0.3
But that's
times
the way
600,000.
that's the name of the weather. I mean,
Times 10 cents, right?
No, he's,
yeah,
Rick said
0.3 dollars times, called 600,000 for round numbers.
that's 180,000.
Yes, 108,000. So that may be, we may see a tripling of our, just for a 6-month period,
Mhm.
and who knows what the rates will do after that. But we may see a tripling in the town's return. I didn't think it was nearly that much. I gotta think this through and make sure I'm not.
Yeah, but if it's tripling because the difference is so much bigger, it used to be about 50 or 60, so that's about right.
Yeah, no, it used to, the rolling average. As of the end of October was 62,000 for the year.
Yeah, so times
So
3,
so
it's
times
180.
3, we're looking at 180, yeah, so.
I think we can afford it. I think it's a good idea to incentivize.
Pretty minor incentive, really.
Oh,
I mean,
something.
there may be people now come and charge. Who wouldn't have otherwise, but so it costs us something to create a public good. I don't see that as a bad thing.
Need a motion?
No, you'd just be leaving it. as
Okay,
is.
good.
What do you think, Archie?
I don't know, I'm torn both, and I don't like the idea of us subsidizing.
Incentivizing.
No, come on. You could say that about anything. We could be encouraging people to eat kale or something and subsidizing the purchase of kale for, you're laughing, but that's what we're doing.
It's semantics, granted.
So that's, I don't know how far you carry it. It's a minor amount of money. It's just the principle of it. But we do stuff like that. We give people free vaccines or stuff like that. So there's we fluoridate the water. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's
Actually, people who pay for the water still. We don't charge them extra for the water.
I guess they pay for it, don't they? Yeah, okay. You shouldn't have said that.
I gotta be honest here, Sorry, I shot down the analogy.
Yeah.
It might have worked the way I wanted, but gotta be honest.
My other question is, so what happens in the spring? What happens if are we gonna have to play with this all the time?
So the first time that the rates were set.
What if rates go up more in the spring? Unlikely, but
It's not impossible, but the likelihood of that happening, I think, is pretty darn close to zero. I mean, demand goes down.
correct, yeah.
Mathematically.
I just like, I would rather that you have something that you can, that we set a policy on what we're gonna do going
To
forward.
like index the rates.
Or something, so that we don't have to do this all the time, that's all. Or just leave it alone, I don't care.
So just to make it even more confusing, add even more perspective. Understand that up until this point, we've been making, or the town has been making 10 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So,
How do you
Hey,
mean,
now
from
it-
the solar?
yeah, charging you 35 cents a kilowatt.
No, even before accounted for the solar, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't, I guess, yeah. There was.
See, I don't think the solar has anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Those are two different issues, yeah.
They are, but I was trying to blend them.
But we were charging 35 cents a kilowatt hour and the invoices were for what?
I don't remember.
But
I
less
actually, I
than
can
that,
find that, yeah. No,
20 something.
Yeah, but it's the market rate of what electricity is, rather, the solar has nothing to do with it.
No, I know, but even before you factor, I think it was before you even factor the solar in, the town, for every hour that's been charged, the town has been clearing some revenue.
right.
Because we're charging the customer more than we're being charged by the utility without even taking into
Okay.
account the solar.
So is there a reasonable index we could use so that we didn't have to, discuss this every time the rates change?
Well, I could have just kept my mouth shut. I could have just never sent the email raising the question.
No, I think it's a good
So-
question. to
so-
discuss.
yeah,
It's a good question.
Well, that, that was kind of a wise guy answer to that question,
Really?
The real answer is
But-
not gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, notice.
Well, I've been that all night, so it's okay.
I don't know if there's an index. You could,
Well, what, could you think about that and report back?
Sure.
Okay.
yeah, I'll talk to you in 6 months.
Okay.
I say we just leave it alone, and then maybe in the spring, it'll be back the way it was,
It'll be back somewhere.
yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever be where it was, but hard to say.
Okay, so we'll let that lie. I think it's great. It's a great service that the Energy Sustainability Committee provides because it's really helpful that you're on this because it's a help. Me and my staff aren't, we're paying the bills, but we're not tracking these things as closely as regulars over are, so. All right, letter H, it is the time of year.
We have to save the electricity to light the tree.
How much does it cost to
Yeah.
light the tree for the year?
So I was gonna suggest a week from Thursday, which is December 1st, it's traditionally been on a Thursday, doesn't mean it needs to be, but we could go a week later, but that's, I think, I had CPC down for the 8th. That can't be right.
No, third Thursday.
Right, what did I have on my calendar for the 8th? Maybe it was CIC. Yeah, CIC on the 8th. CPC or 15.
No, I have a CIC on the 8th.
Yeah, CIC, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's at 7:30.
what,
It's at 7:30.
yeah.
What time's the tree line?
Oh, yeah, actually, it could be, could be it. I don't know, I didn't pull up last year's flyer to see, but I feel like it was more like 6 or 6:30 is
Yeah.
typical. So it could be before CIC on the 8th, that would give a little more planning time.
It might give also even to decorate the tree, get the
Yeah,
lights on and
yeah.
stuff, give them a little more time.
Annual tree lighting was at 6:30.
6:30 on what date? Oh, it's December 9th last year. Okay, so.
It was Friday night.
Well, last year, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a Thursday.
Oh, right, I'm sorry.
I had just, I was gonna suggest, that we ask if our, COA nutrition coordinator, Jen Vincent, could do cookies. I did talk to Christine today, she said she thought that would be fine.
Mhm.
They could pull it together, could next Thursday. If we had an extra week, that would be a plus. Brian Richards available next Thursday. So if you want to do the first, we can do the first. If you want to push it back a week, that would give more time to get the word out. To just plan it. What do we want?
I'd say 8.
Yeah,
Okay, great. 12:08. That's what was it?
6:30.
6:30. 12:08 at 6:30. Okay, we will plan accordingly and we'll put together a little flyer like we did last year and get that around through the. We'll post that at different places around town. Thank you. Letter I, meeting dates for the first half of next year.
That'll work for me.
Although I'm looking at April, that would be. That could be the town meeting date, so you may, but you know, these can always be changed. It's just to have something to put on the calendar and. You know, if 1 or 2 of them needs to be changed, if the date gets closer, that's not a big problem. Just,
so the January 3rd. Isn't that gonna be difficult to pull a pack together over a holiday weekend for you?
it will, but, I think,
I'm sorry, Wendy, what was your question?
January 3rd. I was just asking if it would be challenging to pull together, pack it over a holiday weekend.
Yeah,
yeah, it will. Yeah, I mean, you know, I do think I like having that January 30th, because I think that's a good date to present the budget. Yeah, I mean, not a lot's gonna happen, you know. Between, you know, mid-December and early to mid-January, a lot of my focus is putting together the budget. So. When I say not a lot's gonna be happening, I mean, there's not really gonna be things for the board.
so why don't we have a meeting on, if we have to. On the 9th.
Yeah.
And then it's like the 17th it's more than a week, it's actually a week because of the holiday, then that's a little more than a week. And maybe on the 17th we have one of our shorter meetings, we don't have that much to do.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Go over that again.
So we do the 9th,
3rd,
and then we have like a shorter meeting,
Wait,
Angus,
the 9th of
January. And on the 17th, with the holiday on the 16th, you know, Angus doesn't have to we have a shorter meeting, Angus doesn't have to put together such a big packet, because it's 1 week and it's also, you know, a holiday weekend.
Okay.
So what would we need to be looking at? Would there be stuff that warrant wise and so forth that we would be looking at on one of those days?
you know, if we follow similar to last few years, typically the warrant closes right around the end of January.
Okay, so the end of January,
Yeah,
okay.
so I think that really all of their January meetings, you'd be having some discussion about potential warrant articles.
Okay,
It was on my calendar. And I just changed that one meeting. And I set them up as a repeat.
I messed up every single one after.
Normally it asks me change future events or not, and it didn't give me the option, it just changed everything. I don't understand that.
It's not set in stone, and you all tend to have, fair number of special meetings anyway, but it's, we typically in 6-month increments kind of generally sketch out, future dates.
Oh, I see. So New Year's is actually the 2nd.
Right.
The holiday.
Yeah, it's confusing. Okay, I'll never figure that out. I think February 27th, I'm not gonna be.
Could be sailing down the Caribbean.
I don't know, I'm going somewhere. I forget.
Well, do you want to reschedule that one, or do you want, we can always change this, as we get closer. If you want to, or we can meet without you and Deb, we can think
You
of
can-
everything that we know you would vote against and.
Leave my free cash alone.
All right, how about the well?
So at the moment, it's okay, whatever. We can leave it for the moment.
Okay, yeah, it's really not set in stone, it's meeting to meeting, but it's good to, get things on the calendar. Good. Yeah, I mean, at some point, it is actually really nice at times to have 2-week gap between meetings, because if there was like a week off, I'm either missing a meeting week or missing a week before a meeting, which is always a challenge, so, but I think this is a good schedule. All right, we got meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of November 1st.
Second.
Anyone have any comments? I didn't either.
No, you're good.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Item K, I included in the packet the memo that had been sent to the planning board. They had a discussion last Tuesday evening. Both Rick and Wendy were also present for that. And they seemed to take what was offered and the spirit in which it was offered. They were a little surprised at some of the items, why they did priorities, but as we talked it through, I think they understood where we were coming from, and I think as they get additional analysis that's known at the staff level, but maybe haven't gotten to the board level yet, I think they will understand why some of these things are on there, such as the wireless.
They thought we were ignoring things, or we
No, they
had,
were
we had
just
stuff they
surprised
hadn't
for-
thought of.
Yeah, well, for things like wireless and for the cannabis, they were kind of like surprised, like, why are those priorities? And the reason is that, if you don't do any, you could get caught flat-footed if there's, let's say, a wireless cell tower proposal and your bylaw is effectively unenforceable. That's an awkward position to be at. when there's an application bearing down on you with a limited time frame, as opposed to right now, you have some breathing room to really deal with that more proactively, hopefully before that happens.
What,
But they-
I'm just curious, what's wrong with our cell tower thing?
In 2010, there were wholesale changes to the federal law on that, and there have been even further changes since then in the last couple of years that even shortened the timeframe for approvals. The Federal Communications Commission adopted a so-called shot clock that back in 2010 that set a maximum of 150 days for the permitting process for a cell tower. That's, I believe, been further reduced to 90 days.
Okay,
So, and basically, if the carrier or the proponent of the cell tower, which is often not the carrier, it's a separate company building the tower who then leases the space. If they demonstrate a gap in service, you're basically required to approve it because they are entitled to fill that gap in service. So they do these RF frequency analyses and these like heat maps that show gaps. And if there's a gap in service and they're showing something that's going to fill the gap, you really don't have the right to say no. So there's
so
things you can do.
the federal supersedes any, okay.
Yeah, and the way I explain it, because this happened when I was in Westford, and it was adopted, I think, January 2010. Cell towers was already a big topic I was given when I was the new director of land use. I started January 2010. Because they had recently denied a cell tower, it had gone to appeal, and they had gotten remanded back to the ZBA, ordering them to approve it. So they basically got their hat handed to them in court. And so they wanted to redo their wireless, and then right around the same time, the FCC approved this wholesale change. I mean, I'm talking about the shot clock, but there were a lot of other changes that they approved. And so we did a comprehensive rewrite of our bylaw. And there's things towns can do to guide the deployment of wireless in a way that's least objectionable. And there's things you can do with design preferences and setting hierarchies of the type of design that's going to be preferred. So it's not like you're without tools, but the a lot of the town like Westford at that time, their only zoning districts that allowed towers were basically along the 495 and along the Route 3 corridors. That was totally indefensible because that's not where the demand is, and there were gaps in service in town, and those were known and documented, and so the wireless companies, it just the bylaw was unenforceable. So the way I started to think about it as I was learning about all this was, people think of it as a commercial use. It's really the better way to think about it is it's like infrastructure. It's part of our infrastructure. It's not like a commercial use that's got to be in a commercial district. It's got to.
It's like a road.
Yeah, like the infrastructure is going to be deployed where it's needed, and that's going to be driven by population. So when you have towns that are seeing growth in places that didn't used to have neighborhoods, it's only a matter of time before wireless carriers want to provide service to those locations. And then you have different carriers operating at different frequencies, which have different geographic spreads. And so, it ends up being fairly complicated. So not to say West Newbury needs to do anything about it, but you need to know that your bylaw as written is probably not, the words on the page are probably not enforceable. And so, my concern is if someone does come knocking and you have a bunch of neighbors and they're like, it says right here that they can't do it in this zone. Well, that's not legally defensible. And you can say no, and you can take them to court, or they'll take you to court and you'll get absolutely smacked down because the law is very clear. So it's just something that I think our bylaw is stale, and it doesn't reflect, this was a major change 12 years ago, so it's not like that new.
So it wasn't the outcome that we're gonna have town council look at the
Yeah,
bylaws?
yeah. So that's the next step, town council, and the same thing with the Solar, we've given.
I mean, I would think that the cell seems like something we could. That shouldn't be too demanding, it should be cut and paste from somewhere else. I wouldn't think we'd have to customize it.
No, it's more of a political issue because people are generally not gonna be favorable toward, proceeding.
Oh,
to
so
expand where
the-
you allow solar
But if we
or-
have to, then we have. to.
Right, it's kind of like a 40B type thing, except actually the law is even a lot stronger than for 40B. Like anyhow, I won't,
Yeah, okay.
You guys
No,
will
but
learn
now I
about it
know,
yourself.
now I know why we have to do it,
Yeah.
okay.
well, you gotta look at it.
Well,
Solar,
on cell in particular, I mean, there's another perspective.
Hmm.
I know of multiple people in town who live in places where they have no cell service in their homes. And they would like to have cell service.
Is that, really?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, no, there are a bunch of holes in the cell service in this town, and, people that they're just. Resign themselves to not having cell service, or they have to walk outside the door to one specific spot in the yard. And stand there regardless of the weather, in order to talk on their cell phone.
Well, and so in an emergency, that could be a
Right.
problem.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. Or in an emergency where landlines aren't,
Mhm.
where landlines aren't working at all, then there is no alternative.
So solar, the next step there was also to have town council review that and determine whether, there's problems with it, especially in light of this recent, planning decision, which significantly expanded the Dover Amendment exemption for solar. So I gave Robin the green light at the very night of the town, the planning board meeting. I sent her a note because we corresponded about that back in June. And at that time, she had offered to do a kind of a deep dive, and I said, hold off. Until I have some sense that one of the other board is actually gonna, want to look into that. And so now that the planning board expressed openness to that, I told her to go ahead and do that. The next day, Sue Brown emailed and said, should we also have a look at wireless? I said, let's just have her do one and then the other, just partly because I could tell from Robin's response, she's got bandwidth issues. She wanted to know what's the deadline, how soon is that? I said, just why don't you do that first? And then once we get her report on that, I will then have her do wireless. Then under recreational marijuana policy, Sam is doing some analysis on that. So he's already, actually earlier today, he sent around a memo to me and Sue Brown. So actually you guys will receive that in your emails tomorrow. I hit send, but I post dated it because I didn't want to confuse things for tonight because it wasn't really, but he did an analysis of that. My thought would be to let the planning board chew on that for a couple of meetings and then come back rather than working parallel. But that's, if any of you want that on the next agenda, we can talk about it. But my thought would be, let's have the planning board, chew on it. MBTA Communities Action Plan, we'll have that for your review in January. Maybe something to talk about sooner. Housing production plan, we've got a meeting.
First.
Yeah, but we actually have a meeting, I want to say, the first, then with just the planner.
Mhm.
Yeah, not the big group meeting. Right, yeah, that's a week to Thursday. And then the ADU bylaw, Sam kind of wanted to understand what the objective was there, so he was going to get together with Sue to understand what it is they're trying to get done. Where we already allow duplexes, he had some questions as to what's the goal there. So we can expect more. We can expect to hear more about those things as the planning board digs into them. Middle Street Bridge updates. I included, some recent updates from the consultant. more recently, actually earlier today, Wayne, has sent a note to the DPS
Thanks.
director in Newbury.
That's probably all right.
Wayne did a site visit last week, to clean up the barrels, adjust some of the concrete barriers. He noted the 2 sinkholes that had developed, and had asked if Newburyport can patch those, sinkholes. So we haven't had a response yet.
Where is that?
The Mill Street Bridge.
Okay.
The chapter 91 license is underway. That's a longer road. The chapter 85 permit is, it feels like close to completion. I did meet with Mayor Reardon on Thursday. We talked at some length about the bridge. Similar to the meeting we had back in January, but at that time he was very new. At this point, he's been there, he has a much better, sense of things, including how this fits into their bigger picture. I really emphasize the point that if the MassWorks grant expires at the end of the year, if we have to turn back those monies, that would be a loss for both communities, and we completely understood that. And that our objective would be to get, restart discussions regarding an intermunicipal agreement on the cost share of the net costs. And I told them that if we don't have a tangible commitment from the city of Newburyport, our chance of getting a grant extension, which is already going to be an uphill climb, is basically nil. That we really need them at the table, and he's very happy to do his part to help make that happen. But he was going to get one of their counselors involved, whoever would be the point person for that kind of discussion. So. I did get a copy today of the complete chapter 91 submittal, so I can send that around. I didn't have it when I put the packet together. Just that the file sizes were too large. Anything on that? Safe Routes to School, that grant went in on Friday. I think they did a nice job with it. I thought Christine did a terrific job, kind of coordinating the whole thing and getting all the letters of support, which was terrific. She and I met on, I think, Thursday and Friday to help fine tune the whole thing, but I will say the entire submittal of this whole thing, I spent less than maybe an hour and a half total, right? Which if she was not on staff, there's no way we would have met this deadline. And if we hadn't had TEC's, work, there's no way we would have been able to do this in-house. Not on the timeline that we have. So great. They did say that, DOT, there is some dialogue that takes place, once the applications are received. So it's not like, if this ends up being too ambitious, it's not like it's necessarily going to be a yes or a no. Like, they could work with us to scale down the application rather than deny it. But we'll see. There's probably a decent chance we won't get it this round, and that we would try again next year. But I think it was a nice application, and maybe we will. It has everything to do with how many other applications they receive. Anything on that?
So it would just be a matter of resubmitting the same design and everything, or would we have to-
Presumably, unless the program parameters change. I mean, they would need to update cost estimates at that time. But I think it's a good project, whether it's this year or next year.
Mhm.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to show that maybe someday it would connect the whole further down, but it is what it is. Yeah, we're trying. Yeah, that's a bridge too far at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you may have, scratched your head on some of these yes or no questions on, because Christine and I did, and we talked it over with TDC, but for instance, check all the objectives that apply, increase number of pedestrians to and from school. No. Well, that's weird. Why wouldn't you say yes? Well, the reason is we're not actually providing access to any existing homes that don't have access now. Because all the state counts is their complete access, not is the sidewalk now,
No, I know, it has to be
No, it's
the
like,
whole,
you provide like
yeah,
door-to-door access, you cannot say that you're providing access. So those are the kinds of things that, aren't necessarily intuitive when you look at how it's answered. But that's where it's helpful to have a consultant who knows kind of how the state thinks about those things. And you can see they kind of set the table for looking for design exceptions on the shared use path and the problems that would create if we could do that kind of way.
is there going, if it goes, is there any problem with us putting asphalt on the pipes, Dave?
It's only within the municipal use area where,
But is that okay?
that's okay.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, but that's exactly why.
That's why it is. I know that, yeah.
Next item, the Whittier Tech, Rick and I went to a lunch meeting on Friday, hosted by the superintendent, Maureen Lynch. We've been invited to that 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was attended by either mayors or town city manager types from, I don't know if all 11 towns were there, but
A bunch.
a bunch. And they had been, briefing us about the school projects for the last 2 years or so, but this was the first time they shared numbers. And it will be costly. And in order for them to bring this to get through the MSBA process, they would need approval in all 11 cities and towns. Not this spring, but a year from this spring, so.
Meaning what?
Just like with our regional agreement, to incur capital costs, you need 100% approval. So
So we actually have a choice on this? This isn't something that we just, okay, you gave us the bill, we have to pay.
correct,
Oh,
yeah. To the extent that there'd be a debt exclusion or an override, I don't know whether that would be our situation. But that's certainly going to be the situation in many, if not most, of the cities and towns. So they would all need to approve that. It might be for anything. I got to reread the regional agreement.
it might be what?
It might be for any capital
Oh, okay.
item. We might need to approve. I'm not sure. I do have a copy of the Whittier regional agreement. But it was presented that all 11 cities and towns would need to approve this. And they gave a breakdown of the share of capital costs.
What is the option A versus B? 1,280 students versus 1,400 students?
Yeah, they took the 1,400 students off the table. I just figured that was, the price tag was too high.
Okay.
And, I think their perspective was that in an ideal world, they would increase the population, the number of students, because there's demand that can't currently be filled. But looking at the cost differences, they didn't flesh it out as thoroughly as they had the 1,280, but there was a fairly significant jump. I don't remember what the numbers are, but they're shown, but they decided to take that one off. the table.
Okay.
Part of the, cost driver for the local costs is the fact that the site costs are not participating with MSBA, so there wouldn't be any state reimbursement for any of the site costs.
Were they broken out somewhere?
No,
Was
They
there
took
any
percentage?
consideration to
this is all.
Oh.
a different site?
No, not
Okay.
that was discussed.
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that too, Archie. I mean, it didn't ask the question, but, you know, I mean, this site is it going to be a challenging site, you know, I think the site costs are going to be huge. And I mean, I don't know.
I mean, and with such a big area that they might, I guess it would be hard to get access, you know, how would they purchase or get that? They'd have to get land that they don't have, so that would also
You mean,
add
you
cost.
mean to
Yeah.
change the site constraints?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if you look at the, this picture here, but you know, that's the existing school and, you know, so. Amesbury Line Road is somewhere out here, you know, so you have this long route in, and obviously you're not building there. This is a big hill right here. There's wetlands. There's another picture somewhere that showed a wetland, I thought. You know, that showed.
well, I know there's a
more-
big,
more-
I
more-
know
more-
there's a big hill.
Yeah,
there.
yeah, there's a big hill right there, there's another hill over here, that, you know, there's. The land is mostly up or down or wet. I mean, there are some areas that can be built, but then you come down to this issue of. How do you get in there with more than, you know, currently there is one road that goes in.
That shows the green. On the hills.
Oh, yeah, there we go, yeah.
And that blue is wetlands. Well, blue on the screen, but. Green on the Angus screen. The big blotch in the corner is wetlands.
Right.
So it's a, you know, it's an ambitious undertaking, but it's, they're very excited about the project, and I think they understand that they're gonna need to do a lot of local organizing in each of the 11 communities. We talked about Weir-Kentucky as a model that, you know, really wouldn't pass here without that kind of grassroots organizing. Obviously, they have a different circumstance because they don't have, you know, it's not like most of the households in any of their communities are sending their kids to this school. It's a really different political ask. And so I think part of what they're going to be prevailing on communities to consider is kind of the function that Whittier serves within the regional economy in terms of, you know, training the people who build our communities and make them work. And so there's going to be a, you know, a sense of the public interest that's served by their continued success and, you know, into the future, as well as the whole alternate futures discussion, which we had with our middle high school. You know, yes, this is expensive, but if we don't do this, you know, this is the path that would be ahead in terms of the upgrades that would be needed, the triggers that would hit in terms of code compliance, and the cost that will come with that. So they talked about, you know, for one thing, the sprinkler is not sprinkled, so the sprinkler system, I used a figure of around $6 million or 6 point something million, but that once you start doing that work, it can hit other thresholds that trigger code compliance, and the price tag goes up and up and up.
Gotcha. So you start trying to fix one thing, and by the time you get done with everything else that's triggered, you're spending as much as you would to build a new school, or pretty close to it. And you still just have an old school.
Yeah, I think they said that the repair and expand option was on the order of like 30 million less.
Yeah, I was surprised at how, you know, not significant a difference there was.
Yeah, that's right, here it is. So you can expect to hear a lot more about this project, and I think that this, you know, the more that this board wants to learn about it, the better, because I think realistically, it's gonna, if there is gonna be any chance for support for a project like this, I think it's gonna take real leadership within each of the 11 communities And because of the relatively small number of students from some of the communities, it's not probably gonna be a grassroots type thing. It's gonna need some kind of, leadership from elected officials if it's gonna have a prayer.
Yeah, I think, some of the points that have to be made is, when was the last time you looked around for an electrician, who'd you find? And how old were they? When was the last time you looked around for a plumber? And who'd you find and how old were they? And, there's a whole series of questions like that, not a lot of people have gone into the trades compared to other fields, and a lot of the people who are in the trades are later in their careers. So, society-wide, we're really reaching a point where there aren't tradespeople. And, who's gonna service that need?
So is the capital cost share population based?
What I'll do, I'll send around the regional agreement, because I don't know it. I have it, but I haven't looked at it closely, but I know I have it. I just saw it in the last couple of days, so I'll
Okay.
just send it around. We can all learn about it together. I don't know how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, 3.11%, I think was ours, and 3.23, or yeah, 3.11 in the most recent fiscal year. When you're talking about numbers like this, that's it's a lot.
It's not, our student population versus total resident population. I always thought it was student, were assessed at least for operating by our student participation. So it goes up and down.
For the operation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how the,
I don't know about capital.
how the capital cost.
I don't know.
I'll circulate the
There's
regional
cable.
agreement. Anything else on that?
Wasn't there somewhere in this a breakout of community? Did I?
Yes, after the slides, this one here.
Yeah, okay, is that, no, breakout of communities by population, what I was trying to figure out is, was there a correlation, is it student based or is it population based, the cost, the cost sharing?
It didn't show on that, you can't tell.
Yeah,
I mean, just looking at populations. From what I have from memory, it's not population based, because Merrimack is a smaller population than Newbury, for example. And Newbury has a smaller assessment than Merrimack does.
So it's student population.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I mean, anecdotally looking at it.
okay.
Next item, update on capital improvement process. So I had sent around a couple of weeks ago the draft updates of the capital improvement program. Those were also sent to the capital committee with Matt. Early last week, 10 days ago, or yeah, 10 days ago. Really good meeting. It was a really good discussion. So they're gonna chew on those draft updates, and then at their next meeting in December, December 8th, coming out of that, they'll we'll put that up on the CIC website, and then in December, January, be looking more specifically at potential FY24 projects, and then those will obviously go through review in January, February, March, leading up to their recommendations, which are I think So 45 days prior to town meeting, something like that. The bylaw sets that out, but you know, I think it was a really good meeting. We have another meeting of the Page School Working Group tomorrow morning. So that's obviously a big piece of this. Housing production plan, yeah, we've got a meeting, next Thursday? With myself, the town planner, the MVPC designee, and we invited the Affordable Housing Trust to participate, and I believe Wendy's gonna be there, and maybe one or more others of the Affordable Housing Trust. So that would be good to have.
When is the meeting?
It's a daytime meeting a week from Thursday.
Wednesday, the 7th.
No, it's the
No,
That's the hazard mitigation. one.
Yeah, that's
1:30.
1:30 on the first.
Mhm.
So you can expect to hear more about that as we start to get into some details on that. Similar thing with the next one with our tax mitigation plan. Got that regional kickoff on December 7th, and we've sent invitations to many town departments as well as the Climate Change Resiliency Committee. And I think both of these, we're gonna get out of them what we put into them, where it's a regional effort. And there's, 14 towns, cities, and we're, among the smaller. I think that the more hands-on and active we are, the more valuable, these will be to us. And then finally, the last week, just great timing, happened to have the annual insurance review. That's like a 2.5 hour meeting every year. Normally I would have had someone else with me, but this year with our staffing, it was just me. So that was fun. But it was, it was a good meeting. A couple of the things in terms of coming down the road that were kind of interesting. One is, it's all but certain that starting next July 1st, in order to continue to have the cyber coverage, they're going to require certain things like 2-factor authentication, which is good. That makes sense, but it's just going to make us that much less efficient.
Yeah.
That's going to go over.
It's actually not been, it's been shown that actually doesn't prevent anything.
Maybe you can help me show it.
No, I mean, it's the, any good hacker can get around it. It's not, people think, oh, the phone call or the text is it makes it that. I've read that it doesn't really help.
Logs me out every
But-
half hour.
but-
I don't do it again.
Yeah, just make us less efficient. So, I mean, there were a bunch of little things that came out of the meeting, but the two kind of bigger things that I took away, that was one of them. And another was, and this is more for curiosity than anything, that Maya is taking an increasingly hard line on municipalities renting out any portion of their space. To where, and he said, we're grandfathered in, so this isn't something, at least for next year, we really need to worry about. But I thought it was interesting that from a policy standpoint, he said that if we were looking to insure today, either the old town hall or Page School, they wouldn't cover it. If any
Really?
portion of the building is rented out, they would not cover it.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
they're insurers who back them up. There have been, there was an example given of, what was it? It was something where there was like catastrophic damage to a building that caused from maybe a fire in a sublet, like a rental apartment within a building. And it caused catastrophic damage to public facility and, like the secondary insurers who covered Maya were like, I thought we were covering a municipal building. We didn't know we were covering whatever this other use was.
So, but Angus, does that apply also to just like, you know, renting out the annex for an hour or something? Or
No, that would be customary. He was talking
But
about.
both
like-
Learning Tree and Children's Castle.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
So it's not anything that's gonna affect us like right away, but it's in terms of like watching the trends and things, the way the world is going.
So, okay, so Children's Castle has a 3-year lease.
Yep.
They're a year and a half into it.
Mhm.
Learning Tree has basically,
It's a 2-year,
Oh,
at the end of June.
they did finally sign, okay.
Well, no, the spirit of it is, no, it's.
Well, I'm
it's
just
month to
wondering-
month. Yeah, legally, it's,
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that's gonna work with Maya then.
well, perhaps we have to insure it a different way.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can always get
Yeah,
insurance.
we insure buildings outside of Maya,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I
yeah,
guess it would.
but no, it's. Yeah, I know the example I was thinking, it wasn't that one, it was on the back of the cyber. The town of Franklin paid a $500,000 fraudulent invoice. And
Did they pay it?
They paid it, the town paid it.
That's what I
They
mean,
only
yeah.
covered, I think 100,000 of that. So they were out a lot of money.
Whoa,
Yeah, so he used that as a cautionary tale. You know, there were some other things that came out of that. But I just wanted to make you aware the meeting took place and it happens every year. And we go through the entire insurance binder, every page, every policy, every coverage, every deductible.
Angus, is there any kind of like, you know, staff OSHA courses or things that we can do to lower our, to get points and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's the Maya Rewards program. You can get up to 3%. You know, you get credit for different, you know, documenting that you know, go into certain trainings. So we've been, you know, going to the trainings, for the, when I should generalize, but things like DPW and water have been really good about making sure their staff are going to the workplace safety and doing all that. And so, yeah, we can, you know, we need to get credit for all that stuff, but since there hasn't been anyone really with insurances.
Do you have any rough idea off the top of your head what the town's total insurance premium?
I do, yeah, I had it broken down in detail for last week's FinCom meeting, but I think they might ask, but I know the total amount we budget is just under 200,000.
Okay.
The breakdown of that, property casualty is, you know, probably 60 to 65% of that. But then there's the police and police and fire, coverage is, I want to say like 25 or 30 grand. There's workers' comp is a certain amount. I have a detailed breakdown that I use for budgeting. But I want to say of the 199,000, I want to say like property casualty was like 136. But even that isn't that simple because that's the town share and the invoice for the town and water, which we then break apart based on proportional assignment of value. So the numbers I use for budgeting don't correspond exactly to what the invoice says because they're apportioned between general fund and water. So.
But it sounds like it's maybe 1.25% or so of the operating budget. If it's up close to 200,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you added health insurance to that, that would be obviously more.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, you know, just part of the kind of day-to-day work.
And make a motion to adjourn and go into executive session for a short thing. items. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A6. We didn't get to 362.
Right. Yeah, good.
And we can do that I think, real quick.
Second,
Archibald, aye.
Read,
Parker, aye.
Okay, so the board will recess to executive session and will only return to open session for the purpose of adjourning the meeting.